You have been told to find peace by putting everything around you in order, by finding the perfect job, fixing every mistake, and controlling every outcome. But if that worked, why does your mind still race at night? Why does your heart still feel heavy even in silence? Why does the tension never really let up, no matter how much you achieve? The truth is that peace doesn't come from outside. It comes from within, from how the mind deals with the world, not from how the world bows to the mind. Buddhism has been whispering this truth for over 2,500 years, not through loud promises, but through quiet power, through silence, through mindfulness, through letting go. Tonight, something will change. As these teachings unfold, the noise in your head will gradually fade away. The restless need to fix something, to understand, to hurry, it will subside. You will feel it, like a knot slowly untying, like water finally becoming still, like a gentle exhalation after holding your breath for far too long. This is not just another audio recording to help you fall asleep. This is medicine for the modern mind. A guided walk through ancient paths that lead directly to the present moment, to deep calm, to clarity, to peace. Are you ready to come home to yourself? Then let's begin. And now, as your mind begins to calm, we step through the first door. The path that does not shout, but speaks loudest in its silence. It is time to explore what most never hear, not because it is not there, but because they have never learned to listen. There is a sound that is not produced by anything external. It has no volume, no echo, no vibration, and yet it changes everything. It is not silence in the sense of the absence of sound. It is the presence of consciousness. This is what Buddhist monks have spent a lifetime learning to hear. The silent gong. It only sounds when the mind is still enough to feel it. Most people live in noise, not because the world is loud, but because their thoughts are loud. The phone doesn't have to beep for the mind to check on it. No one has to speak for the heart to feel pressure. That is the chase, a mind addicted to friction, interpretation, and analysis. But what happens when the analysis ends? Not because the answer has been found, but because the need for an answer has disappeared. That is the starting point. Silence in Buddhism is not synonymous with silence. It is not a deficiency. It is an active presence. Like standing in a forest and feeling the whole world breathing without words. Like when you see a candle flickering in a dark room and realize that the room was never really dark. You just never saw it, without distraction. This happens when the inner chatter falls silent. You begin to perceive not only the outer world, but also the silence beneath it. The clarity that was always there, but was buried under commentary. Training your mind to hear the unspoken means no longer demanding that life speak your language. Because life already speaks, it just doesn't always use words. A falling leaf, a slow breath, a pause in conversation. Most people overlook it because they're too busy preparing their response, planning their next move, or worrying about how they're being perceived. But the silent gong doesn't care about such things. It waits, and the moment you stop chasing the noise, it sounds. That's why so much of Buddhist training revolves around silence. Not silence in the sense of a quiet environment, but silence in the sense of inner stillness. A mind that stops grasping does not become dull. It becomes sharp in a new way. It begins to hear subtleties, emotions without names, truths that do not need to be spoken. Wisdom does not reveal itself in grand revelations, but in subtle changes, in how you breathe, how you wait, how you decide not to react. One of the most misunderstood aspects of meditation is that it is only about relaxation. But if it were just about rest, anyone could simply lie down and scroll through their phone. True meditation is much more powerful. It teaches the mind to pause without shutting down, to listen deeply without judgment, to make space for the unknown. This kind of silence changes not only your mood, but your entire perception of reality. Think about how rare it is to just sit and be, without judging, without categorizing, without trying to fix anything. That's what listening to the silent gong trains you to do. A mind that no longer has to solve everything in order to be okay. It is a deep unlearning, an unraveling of years spent trying to control the world by overthinking it. This does not mean that silence solves problems. It means that it changes the relationship to problems. A loud mind fights against reality. A quiet mind joins it. When that happens, stress does not need to be eliminated. It dissolves because the resistance to it is gone. The situation may remain the same, but the struggle within you will not. A Zen teacher once said that silence is the loudest teacher because it reflects everything you put into it. If you sit in silence long enough, it shows you your own restlessness. If you stay longer, it shows you your own fear. If you stay even longer, it shows you freedom. Not because silence has given you answers, but because it has revealed that the questions were never necessary in the first place. Many people fear silence because it reveals their own minds. But that is exactly the point. What becomes visible can be mitigated. What remains hidden retains control. So, when thoughts arise, when it becomes quiet, don't suppress them. Listen to them, not to believe them, but to understand the patterns. Notice how often they repeat themselves, how little they change, and then let them go, like clouds in the sky, like wind through bamboo. You don't have to hold on to them, you don't have to fight them. In Buddhism, one of the deepest practices is noble silence. Not just silent lips, but a silent ego, a silent identity, a silent need to prove yourself. That is where peace begins, not by shutting out the world, but by no longer demanding that it be different from what it is. Silence teaches this without speaking. It simply stands there, unmoving, and lets everything around it move. Hearing the unspoken means no longer reacting to every mental impulse, not because it is bad to think, but because not every thought is useful. Some are echoes, old scripts, remnants of past fears. They do not need to be resolved, just heard, acknowledged, and let go. Imagine the mind as a room full of radios. Each station is a thought, an emotion, a memory. Most people try to control the noise by adjusting the volume of each individual device, but that's not the right approach. You have to take a step back. You have to realize that the radios don't define the room. The silence has always been there, beneath the noise. It's not something you create, you discover it. And when you discover it, you notice something strange. Peace doesn't shout. It doesn't sell itself. It doesn't beg for attention. That's why it's overlooked. But once you've felt it, it exerts a magnetic pull. The longer you linger in it, the longer you want to stay. Not because it entertains, but because it brings you back to yourself. And in this return, everything else begins to soften. Judgments, desires, the constant need for control, They don't disappear immediately, but they lose their influence. Because in silence, nothing can be predetermined, not even fear. It becomes transparent, and in its transparency, it becomes powerless. The great Buddhist teacher Thich Nhat Hanh once said, "Silence is not the absence of something, but the presence of everything." This sentence alone is a lesson. When the mind is silent, it sees more, not less. It feels more, not less. It understands, not through analysis, but through contact, with the breath, with the now, with life, raw and unfiltered. There is no rush. The silent gong does not follow your schedule. It waits until you are ready. It waits until the need to be done disappears, until you no longer try to use silence as a means to get somewhere else, but are finally ready to simply be in it for its own sake. And in this surrender, peace begins, not as a reward, but as the ground that has always been beneath your feet, as the sky that has always been above your head. You just didn't notice it because the commentary was too loud. Let go of that commentary tonight. Let go of the interpretations. Let the mind listen, not for answers, but for the space where questions dissolve. This space is sacred. This space is clarity. This space is where the silent gong sounds. And now that silence has softened the edges of the mind, we encounter the next storm. Not a storm of noise, but a storm of speed. For after silence comes hustle and bustle, not the hustle and bustle of life itself, but the pressure in the mind to keep up, to fix something, to pursue something, to solve something. The urgency that whispers, "This needs to be done now," even if it's not true. It's time to embrace this illusion and slowly dismantle it. There is a kind of hecticness that does not stem from real danger. It arises from habit, a learned momentum that makes the mind feel like it is always lagging behind, always missing something, always just one task away from peace. This is the illusion of urgency. It feels like the truth, but it is a deception, a mental reflex based on years of reinforcing the idea that value comes from speed, that action is important and stillness is weakness. Buddhism calls this restlessness tanha, a thirst, a craving, not just for things, but for solutions, for next steps, for constant movement. But when this thirst is not questioned, it drives everything. It becomes fuel for brooding, for fear, for burnout. It is the reason why so many people lie in bed, physically still but mentally racing. Not because there is something to do, but because the brain does not know how to stop running. Urgency is often praised in modern culture. Hecticness is glorified. Productivity is revered. But Buddhism quietly contradicts this. It teaches that rushing to act without awareness leads to suffering. It leads to acting out of fear, panic, and the illusion that peace will come when everything is done. But when is that ever the case? Life doesn't pause long enough for that moment to happen. Something new always comes along. Another task, another worry, another demand. This is where the real practice begins, not in doing more, but in believing less. By observing how the mind cries now and gently questioning it. Is this really urgent? What would happen if I didn't react immediately? What if this feeling is not the truth, but only a remnant of years of conditioning? The Buddhist path does not combat urgency with more urgency. It meets it with mindfulness. Just as you observe a wave without trying to run away from it, you just see it building up. You see it passing by, because when you clearly recognize urgency, it reveals itself. Most of the time, it is not a real need. It is just a cycle of pressure, a pattern, a habit of speeding up instead of slowing down. That's why monks walk slowly. That's why rituals are unhurried. That's why tea is sipped, not gulped. Every movement is a message. There is no emergency here. Even when the world is spinning fast, the mind doesn't have to. There is always a choice. You can pause, you can return, you can respond from the center, not from panic. This pause is powerful, not because it changes the outside world, but because it changes your relationship to it. Instead of getting carried away by urgency, the practitioner becomes an observer. They observe the pull, feel the pull, and then they don't move. They are simply there. They simply breathe. In that moment, time expands. The pressure loses its influence, and the illusion begins to crumble. One of the greatest gifts of mindfulness is timing, not quick timing, the right timing, knowing when to act and when to wait, when to speak and when to listen, when to move forward and when to sit still. But the right timing only comes in silence, in presence, in slowness. That is what takes away the urgency, the ability to discern. The next time urgency constricts your chest or clenches your jaw, pause, just for a moment. Breathe consciously, not to fix anything, not to run away, just to interrupt the pattern. That breath is the first step out of the illusion, because no illusion can withstand complete mindfulness, especially not this one. False emergencies thrive on momentum, but mindfulness interrupts momentum. It makes you question, it makes you look, and when you look, you often find that there is no fire, only smoke, only habit, only fear wrapped up in important clothes. Slowing down does not mean giving up. It means deciding with clarity. It means acting when the mind is calm, not when it is chaotic. Buddhism teaches right action, not quick action, and right action arises from stillness, from wisdom, from a mind that is not driven by its own urgency. Many people confuse urgency with passion. They believe that rushing means that something is important to them. But urgency is not love. It is fear. It is clinging to outcomes. Love can develop slowly. Passion can wait. Urgency, on the other hand, demands. It causes panic. It tells you that everything will fall apart if you don't act immediately. That is fear speaking, not the truth. One of the most subtle teachings of Buddhism is that peace and urgency cannot coexist. Urgency creates friction in the nervous system. It speeds up the heartbeat. It constricts the breath. It closes the body. But peace expands. It opens the chest. It softens the gaze. It slows the breath. So every moment of pause is a return to peace, a silent rebellion against a world that glorifies haste. This does not mean that you give up your responsibilities. It means that you stop reacting out of compulsion. It means that you do what needs to be done, but from a position of center, not from a position of breakdown. This change changes everything, not just how things are done, but also how they feel. The Buddhist master Ajahn Chah once said, "If it's urgent, it can wait." At first glance, that sounds wrong. But read it again. If it's urgent, it can wait. Because urgency without clarity is chaos. And when you wait, even if only for a breath, clarity returns. That is the power of slowing down. It doesn't delay your life. It brings you closer to it, fully, consciously, moment by moment. The rush to get ahead often leads people away from where they are, and where they are is the only place where they can find peace. So let the world rush by. Let the notifications beep. Let the clock tick. But stay here. Stay in this breath, in this silence. Because the illusion of urgency only works if you believe in it. As soon as you stop believing, it loses its power. And what remains is calm, presence, simplicity. Some monks say that time bends around consciousness, that time slows down when the mind is still, and in this slowness, things become clear, decisions become easier, the heart speaks louder, the body softens, and life, instead of rushing by, becomes tangible. This is the calm amid the pressure, the silence that does not wait for peace, but brings it, right here, right now, not by escaping the urgency, but by seeing through it. Like fog that disappears in the morning light. So tonight, let every urge to rush arise, and then let it pass. Don't follow it. Don't fight it. Just observe it. Let it pass. The breath remains. The moment remains. That is real. That is where peace resides. And from here, the next step will come. Not because it has to, but because it is true. Now that the grip of urgency has loosened and the breath is no longer chasing time, the mind stands on the edge of a deeper freedom. A kind of freedom that comes not from doing less, but from holding on to less. It is time to turn to thinking itself, not to silence or fight it, but to see it clearly, to let it rise and fall without having to hold on to it, fixate on it, or judge it. Because the next step is not about controlling thoughts, but about letting them float. There is a way of looking at thinking that changes the entire relationship with the mind. Not by understanding every thought, but by recognizing what thoughts really are. Temporary, formless, transient, like clouds in the sky. They form, they pass by, they disappear, and none of them is the sky itself. Just as no thought is the mind itself, no feeling is the truth, no emotion is forever. Buddhism does not require the mind to stop thinking. It teaches how to let go of clinging. This discipline is subtle. It is not loud like effort. It is quiet like mindfulness. It begins with a breath. The thought arises, a reaction arises. But instead of holding on to it, instead of identifying with it, consciousness takes a step back. It sees the thought. It gently names it. It names the feeling without becoming it. Sadness, restlessness, excitement, doubt. And through this naming, the thought loses its weight. It becomes a visitor, not a command. Most people suffer not because of their thoughts, but because they identify with them. They believe that every thought must be true, that every inner voice must be followed, that every fear must be avoided. But thoughts are not truths, they are stories, and stories can be observed without being lived. The art of watching clouds begins here, in observing without absorbing, in witnessing without reacting, in letting the story be without becoming its character. Thoughts say, "You're not good enough." Consciousness responds, "That's a thought." Thoughts whisper, "Something bad is going to happen." Consciousness responds, "That's a prediction." Thoughts scream, "Fix it now." Consciousness pauses and simply breathes. In this space between thoughts and self, peace arises. Because the problem is rarely the thought itself, it's the belief that the thought is personal, permanent, or proof of who you are. Buddhist teacher Pema Chodron often says that thoughts are like the weather. Some days it storms, other days it clears up, but the sky doesn't try to stop the rain. It doesn't panic when clouds gather. It just stays. The mind can learn to do this too. Stay, observe, remain untouched. This is not disconnection. It is connection without merging. It means feeling everything without sinking into anything. Sadness is seen, held, allowed, but it is not confused with identity. Fear is noticed, but not followed. Judgment arises, but the self does not collapse beneath it. This kind of clarity is calm, not because the mind is empty, but because the heart no longer clings. Staring at clouds means practicing detachment, not coldness, not suppression, but gentle distance. Enough space between you and the thought to breathe, to choose, to see. In this exercise, everything slows down, not because time changes, but because the urgency subsides. Thoughts lose their commanding tone and become background noise. You hear them, but you don't have to respond. Even helpful thoughts can become cages if you cling to them too much. I must be wise. I should be better. This shouldn't happen. These are the clouds shaped like targets. They seem positive, but they still obscure the sky. Buddhism does not teach us to cling to good thoughts instead of bad ones. It teaches freedom from both. Because freedom does not mean choosing better chains. It means walking without chains at all. This exercise deepens when done in silence. Sit, observe. Don't chase after thoughts. Don't push them away. Let them come, let them go. Feel the rhythm of the mind without changing it. Thoughts will cry out for attention. Some will beg for a solution. Others will tempt you with stories of success or doom. Let them all speak, and let them pass. Eventually, something calm begins to emerge beneath it all. A silence that was always there but never noticed. Not because it was missing, but because attention was always elsewhere. This silence does not demand loyalty. It does not need to be defended. It is simply there, like the space around the clouds, like the sky that never moves. The art of non-attachment reveals this, that thoughts are not enemies and silence is not failure. Letting go of thoughts does not mean losing your mind. It means returning to it. Seeing clearly without commenting, living without being pulled in all directions. Even when thoughts are loud, presence can be louder. Not in volume, but in stability. The Buddha once said, "You are not your thoughts." And only when you feel this, not just know it, does true peace begin. Because when the observer awakens, the story loses control. And when the story loses control, suffering disappears. Not immediately, but reliably, like fog dissolving in sunlight. Training in this way does not mean that thoughts stop. They still arise, but you no longer become them. Anger may arise, but it does not take control. Worries may arise, but they do not paralyze you. Jealousy may whisper, but it does not define you, because you are no longer in the thoughts, you are in the observation, in the vastness, in freedom. This discipline is available at any time, in the middle of a crowd, in the middle of an argument, in the middle of a racing heart. Pause. Feel your breath. Observe how the mind moves. Don't intervene. Just be a witness. That is the art. That is liberation. Even in sleep, the mind floats. Dreams are thoughts in costumes, but the observer can remain still even then. And as this awareness grows stronger, the inner weather plays an increasingly minor role. It rains, it clears up, but the peace remains, not because the conditions are perfect, but because you remember the sky. Now that thoughts are seen as passing clouds and the sky of consciousness begins to expand, something even deeper stirs. It is the moment itself, not as an idea, not as a backdrop, but as something sacred. And the way to encounter it is not through violence, it is through reverence, through an inner bow, not out of submission, but out of silence. Because when the grip on control loosens, presence does not disappear, it deepens. There is a habit built into the human mind: control. Control over results, over perception, over others, over oneself. It starts early and becomes invisible. People learn to predict, prevent, and prepare for what could go wrong. But what no one teaches is that most suffering arises precisely from this attempt to control something that was never meant to be controlled. The Buddhist path does not punish this instinct, it softens it, and it does not replace control with chaos, but with reverence. Bowing to the moment is not a ritual gesture. It is a mental attitude, a way of approaching life without armor, showing up without demanding that it change. It is the gentlest form of strength, the kind that does not break in the wind, but bends with grace. And in this bow, something old is remembered, that humility is not weakness, it is clarity. The kind of clarity that comes when you stop fighting reality and start accepting it. Control narrows your view. It turns every moment into a problem to be solved. It filters life through expectations, but awe expands your consciousness. It lets the moment speak, not in words, but in presence. A single breath, a pause in conversation, the feeling of the ground beneath your bare feet. These are not coincidences. They are invitations, and when you meet them with reverence, they become lessons. The reason most people miss the present moment is not because it is hidden, it is because it is judged. It comes, and the mind immediately evaluates it. Is this good or bad, useful or useless? Does this serve my purpose? But bowing means none of that. Bowing is what happens when the moment no longer has to earn its place. It is allowed, fully and completely, even when it is difficult, especially when it is difficult. Buddhist teacher Jack Cornfield once said, "Peace comes when our hearts are open to everything that is." That is the essence of bowing, not liking everything, not agreeing with everything, but being open to it, letting the moment be what it is before trying to shape it, because every moment has its own nature, its own flavor. Some are warm, some are sharp, some are confusing, but each one, when encountered without resistance, becomes a gateway to stillness. In practice, this means tempering the need to control, steer conversations, correct others, and predict outcomes. It means noticing the tiny reactions, the urge to correct, defend, interrupt, and instead to breathe, to wait, to listen. Bowing is silence where there used to be reaction, space where there used to be conflict, compassion where resistance used to grow. This change does not mean passivity. It means responsiveness instead of reactivity. It means choosing presence instead of panic. And this choice can only arise when awe is felt, not as an idea, but as a lived experience. A quiet awe for the now, a trust that even this, whatever this is, belongs. Control says, that shouldn't happen. Reverence says, that is happening. And in this simple shift, the heart stops tensing up. The mind stops spinning. Life is allowed to unfold, not perfectly, but authentically. Here, the storm calms down, not because the wind dies down, but because the mind bends instead of fighting the weather. Think about how often control masquerades as caring. Parents who control everything out of love. The boss who dominates out of fear. The friend who gives advice before listening. All of this starts with good intentions, but they miss the moment. Reverence does the opposite. It listens, it observes, it creates space, and in that space, wisdom can emerge. In Buddhist monasteries, even sweeping the floor is considered a sacred act. Not because dust is special, but because the moment is special. That is the essence of reverence, the willingness to consider every moment valuable. The everyday becomes radiant. The ordinary becomes a temple. And bowing is not just for statues. It becomes the way the soul moves through the world. In your own life, this might mean taking a breath before responding to difficult news. Letting the silence linger before jumping in with solutions. That you walk more slowly without filling the space with thoughts. That you feel sadness without having to name it or push it away. Bowing to the moment means making peace with not knowing, leaving the mystery unsolved, accepting the now as enough. And when this takes root, a new kind of strength emerges, not the strength to dominate, but the strength to surrender without breaking down, the strength to trust that you don't have to hold everything together for life to unfold meaningfully. That's what bowing teaches us. It teaches us trust, not in fate, but in the present. The present moment is the only place where awe can arise. The past is too rigid, the future is too vague, but the now, it breathes, it moves, it waits for your attention, and when it is met with awe, it blossoms, not because it becomes what you wanted it to be, but because it is seen in its entirety. In this way, bowing becomes a daily practice, one that requires neither incense nor chants. It only requires mindfulness. When the coffee is spilled, when the meeting goes wrong, when the child cries, when the plan falls apart. Bow, not physically, but inwardly. Say yes, even if it's only quietly, even if it trembles, because in that yes lies strength, lies grace, lies peace. This is what Buddhism teaches so gently. The struggle with life is optional. The storm may rage, losses may come, uncertainties may multiply, but the mind can face them differently, not with a clenched fist, but with an open palm, with a bowed head and calm breath. And in this bow, chaos loses its sharpness. So tonight, when your thoughts continue to wander and the urge to plan, fix, or fight arises, pause. Bow to everything, to the fatigue, to the thoughts, to the heartache, to the gentleness. Bow with your breath, with your silence, with your trust. Let the moment be your teacher, not your enemy. From bowing to the moment comes a quiet strength, not the kind that stubbornly defends its position, but the kind that flows, the kind that gives without breaking. And now, this power takes shape. It doesn't look like armor or resistance. It looks like bamboo, a symbol of what the mind can become when it stops hardening and starts bending. Because the mind, just like bamboo, is strongest when it moves with life, not against it. There is a kind of resilience that is not loud. It does not dominate or coerce. It does not destroy what stands in its way. It absorbs, it changes, it bends. This is the principle of bamboo, the wisdom of non-resistance. Here, strength is not measured by how much is controlled, but by how much is accepted without losing balance. Bamboo does not break in a storm because it knows how to yield. It sways, it adapts, it lets the wind blow through it instead of fighting against it. And that is exactly what the mind can learn. When emotions run high, when plans fail, when someone else's anger threatens your peace. There is another way, a gentler way, a way that requires no retreat or submission, but presence without resistance. In Buddhism, non-resistance is not passivity. It is aliveness. It is complete contact with reality as it is, not as the mind wants it to be. It is not about agreeing with everything. It's about remaining balanced in everything. And just like bamboo, the mind becomes unbreakable when it learns to bend. Every time something difficult happens, there is a choice. Resist and feel the burden of the struggle, or bend and feel the change in your inner space. The discomfort may still be there. The situation may not change, but your relationship to it changes. What once felt like pressure becomes a teacher, not because the pain has disappeared, but because the mind has stopped resisting. This change does not require perfection. It starts small, a moment of tension in traffic, a disagreement at work, an unexpected change of plans. These are not interruptions, they are invitations. Each one asks, will you stiffen or will you soften? Will you break or will you bend? Giving in does not mean losing yourself. It means finding your way back to yourself. Letting go of the false identities that say, I must always be right, I must always be in control, I must never feel uncomfortable. These are the fragile parts of the mind, the parts that break when faced with challenges. But the deeper self, the one that observes without attachment, this self is flexible. This self bends like bamboo. Flexibility also means letting go of rigid schedules. The mind loves structures, deadlines, goals, expectations. But life doesn't follow a script, it unfolds. And when those scripts fall apart, the mind that clings to them suffers, but the mind that bends adapts. It moves with the moment, not against it. It listens, it learns, it finds its footing in new places. Mental resilience grows through this flexibility, not by avoiding difficulties, but by facing them without breaking down. Like bamboo, which does not become stronger under perfect conditions, but through the effects of wind, weight, and movement. The same is true of the mind. The more it bends in mindfulness, the more grounded it becomes. This grounding is not found in resistance, it is found in fluidity, in the willingness to be fully present in change. To say yes, not to pain, but to the process. To trust that bending is also a form of forward movement, a form of wisdom. Buddhist texts often describe the wise mind as water-like, but bamboo embodies a similar truth. Both adapt, both flow, both maintain their shape not through force, but through harmony with their environment. This is how suffering subsides, not by changing the world, but by softening the mind that encounters it. Living the bamboo principle means ceasing to demand that things go a certain way. It means learning to respond rather than react, to turn without panicking, to remain rooted without becoming rigid. And you can practice this every day in the way you listen, the way you forgive, the way you pause before you respond. Letting go of resistance also means letting go of judgments. The mind that resists often judges harshly. It wants certainty. It wants everything to be named, categorized, and resolved. But the mind that bends does not have to jump to conclusions. It can live with the unknown. It can allow paradoxes. It can be still in the face of complexity. This makes it resilient. There is a saying in Zen, "Let the muddy water settle, then it will become clear." But the water does not settle by force. It settles when you leave it alone. The same is true of the mind. When it stops trying to control every wave, it begins to reflect. It becomes clear, calm, strong in its silence. Adapting to reality also means forgiving yourself. Perfectionism is a form of inner resistance. It constricts the breath. It narrows the focus. It creates a constant feeling of not being good enough. Self-compassion, on the other hand, reverses this narrative. It says, "This moment is enough. I am enough." And in this relaxation, energy is released. Peace returns. Strength is not found in those who stand still. It is found in those who move wisely, those who dance with difficulties, those who prefer grace to gritting their teeth. And once you make that decision, it becomes a habit, a way of being, a deeper kind of strength. This principle even applies to grief. Grief is not a wave that must be resisted. It is a flood that must be bowed to. You let it flow through you without drowning. You feel the weight of the loss without hardening your heart. The spirit that bows in grief remains human. It remains kind, and with time, it begins to heal. When fear arises, the bamboo spirit does not fight it. It observes, it breathes, it allows the tension to be there without feeding it. This changes the entire nervous system, from reaction to regulation, from tension to openness. And this openness, practiced again and again, becomes a basic attitude. It's not about never falling. It's about not breaking when you fall. That is the gift of this practice, a life that feels less like a struggle and more like a river, flowing through experiences, meeting every turn with curiosity, not control, meeting every moment with grace, not clinging. Tonight, let your body relax into this truth. Let your breath flow without effort. Let your mind bend gently with each new thought, each feeling, each sensation. No resistance, no pushing, just bending, just breathing. When the mind learns to bend like bamboo, a deeper power unfolds, not only in the way thoughts are encountered, but also in the way the body is perceived. For beneath the hustle and bustle of the mind, beneath the whirlwind of emotions, there is something even more stable. The body, the breath, the ground beneath your feet. And when consciousness finally sinks down to this foundation, everything begins to calm down, not through thoughts, but through sensations. Here we touch the earth within ourselves. There is a silent intelligence in the body that speaks long before the mind understands. It does not use words, it does not argue, it does not explain. It feels, it senses, it sends signals. Most people are so caught up in their heads that they cannot hear this language. But Buddhism teaches that the body is not a distraction from meditation. It is a gateway, a path to stillness that requires no solution, only feeling. The practice of somatic mindfulness means shifting your attention downward, away from the story and toward the breath, away from explanation and toward the pulse. It means feeling your feet as you stand, noticing the heaviness in your hands, listening to the subtle vibrations in your chest when you are sad, calm, or afraid. These are not just signals, they are anchors. And when the mind is racing, anchoring yourself in your body is the way home. This awareness does not have to be dramatic. It starts small. Feel the contact between your back and the chair, the feeling of the air touching your face, the pressure where your body touches the floor. These are not things you normally think about, but they are always there, always speaking in the silence. When you listen, the mind begins to slow down, not because it is told to, but because it finally has something solid to rest on. Many Buddhist traditions emphasize mindfulness of the body for this reason. Thoughts are fast, but the body is constant. Thoughts jump back and forth between timelines. They live in the past and race into the future. But the body lives in the now, right now. And when you feel it, really feel it, the nervous system responds. The heartbeat slows down, the breath deepens, the jaw relaxes. Not because something outside has changed, but because consciousness has come home. Touching the earth within yourself means remembering that safety was never part of the plan, but always lies in the present. That peace is not found in control, but in connection. The ground does not argue with the sky, it simply holds everything. The body can do that too. It can hold emotions, it can hold thoughts, it can hold fear, and when held with mindfulness, it does not overwhelm. It's not about escaping thoughts, it's about taking root beneath them. Thoughts will continue, but when attention lives in the body, those thoughts feel lighter. They lose their stickiness. They pass more easily because the mind is no longer trying to think its way to peace. It feels its way into stillness. A helpful exercise is to simply scan the body. Start with the feet. Feel each toe. Notice warmth, coolness, tension. Move slowly upward. Ankles, shin bones, knees. Not to correct or judge anything, just to notice, just to be present. When your attention reaches your head, the energy of your entire system will have changed. Your thoughts will become quieter. Your emotions will become more manageable. Your mind will feel less like a storm and more like the sky again. This is particularly effective for anxiety, because anxiety pulls you into your head, into stories and thought loops and panic. But the body pulls you down, into your breath, into contact, into the now. And when the now is felt completely, the anxiety loses its sharpness, not because the anxiety is wrong, but because it is clearly seen, gently held, and anchored in perception. This even works with grief. Grief is not just mental, it lives in the chest, in the shoulders, in the throat. Somatic grief means letting the body cry, shake, and breathe. Not to be dramatic, but to be honest. The mind may not understand the loss, but the body knows. And when the body is allowed to feel, healing begins. Grounding through the body also changes relationships. When you are present in your own sensations, you are less inclined to project. You listen more, you react less. You can feel other people's words without taking them personally, because your center is not in your thoughts, which you express, but in your body, in your breath. That is where compassion grows, not in theory, but in physical presence. This presence also changes daily life. Washing your hands becomes meditation when you feel the water. Eating becomes mindfulness when you taste every bite. Walking becomes an exercise when you feel the soles of your feet touching the earth. These are not advanced techniques. They are simple, but they are powerful, because they bring you back to the only place where peace has ever been found, right here in sensation. Some may ask, what does touching the earth inside have to do with enlightenment? The answer is everything. Because enlightenment is not a concept. It is direct contact with life. It is the complete embodiment of the now, not a theory of presence, but lived reality. And the body is the bridge. That is why monks walk barefoot. That is why rituals begin with a bow. Why the breath is always the focus. It's not about tradition, it's about embodiment. The sacred is not found in heaven. It lies in the contact between the feet and the ground, between inhaling and exhaling, between consciousness and the heartbeat. That is where silence lies. To practice this, you don't need anything new. No special posture, no special place, just attention, just the willingness to feel without running away. When tension arises, go into it. When numbness arises, stay with it. The body will speak, sometimes with heat, sometimes with pain, sometimes with silence, but it will always speak, and listening to it is the beginning of freedom. Freedom from what? From the shackles of thoughts, from the loop of rumination, from the false belief that peace consists of resolving every thought. Peace is not found in thoughts. It is found in what holds the thoughts, in the breath, in the belly, in the heartbeat, in the pressure of your hand resting on your leg. These are not distractions. They are sacred signposts. Let this awareness grow slowly. There is no need to rush. Every time you return to your body, you build the habit of presence, the habit of safety, the habit of being grounded. And over time, this changes everything. Because a grounded mind does not collapse under pressure. It doesn't drift endlessly. It knows where it stands, because it feels it. So tonight, let your mind come to rest. Let it rest to the rhythm of your lungs. Let it listen to the silence in your bones. Let it feel the stability that has always been there, not in the world, but within you. In the unshakable stillness beneath your thoughts. From the solid ground of somatic awareness, where breath and body become anchor points, the path leads further inward, to something even finer. Beneath the sensations, beneath the changing moods, even beneath the act of perceiving, there is a still point, a center, a flame that burns without flickering. This is not silence that you hold on to, it is silence that holds you. This is called samadhi, a depth of attention that is so steady and unshakable that the whole world becomes still, and for the first time, the mind begins to calm down. There is a kind of peace that does not come from escape or comfort. It comes from single-minded concentration, a mind that stops scattering, a mind that learns to stay. Samadhi is not a mystical trance. It is clarity without clutter. It is what happens when the mind focuses entirely on the present and forgets how to fragment. In daily life, the mind is often pulled in 100 different directions. Even in silence, it jumps from memory to worry, from idea to distraction. This is normal, but also exhausting, because a divided mind never finds peace. It never touches anything completely. It always hovers, always scans, always is a little distant. But samadhi dissolves this distance. It gathers the mind in one place, in one breath, in one moment, until everything else sinks into silence. This does not mean that the world disappears. It means that the mind stops chasing after it. And in this pause, the inner noise begins to dissolve. Not because the mind has been forcibly silenced, but because it is fascinated. The flame of concentration gently and steadily directs attention inward until thoughts lose their pull. The training begins simply, with the breath. Notice the inhalation. Feel the exhalation. Not conceptually, but directly, completely, without splitting. At first, the mind will wander. That's okay. The key is to return. Every time it wanders, bring it back. Not with anger, not with shame, but with kindness. The exercise is not about remaining perfect. The exercise is about returning again and again until remaining becomes natural. Over time, the space between thoughts expands. Distractions lose their appeal. The mind begins to calm down, and what remains is a kind of silence that does not depend on silence. Even in the midst of noise, samadhi remains, like a candle flame in a windless room, bright, still, undisturbed. This concentration is not forced. It is allowed. It arises naturally when the mind finds something that deserves its full attention. In Buddhism, this is often the breath, but it can also be a sound, a mantra, or a sensation. Anything that is simple, anything that is stable. The point is not the object. The point is the relationship. You don't just look at your breath, you immerse yourself in it. You let yourself be absorbed by it until nothing remains but presence. In this state, thinking slows down, emotions calm down, self-consciousness begins to dissolve, not in a frightening way, but in a liberating way. The boundaries that normally feel so narrow, the constant awareness of myself, my plans, my history, begin to blur. And in this relaxation, peace arises. Not the kind of peace you achieve, but the kind that reveals itself when the confusion has disappeared. Samadhi does not ignore the world. It lets the world pass through it. You hear the sounds, but they don't draw you in. You feel the sensations, but they don't disturb you. Your awareness remains stable, present, unmoved. And this stability is healing. It gives your nervous system a break. It gives your heart a break. It gives your mind space to remember what it's like to be whole. This practice also changes how you move through your day. The deeper your concentration, the more mindful each action becomes. You eat with presence. You speak with care. You walk without haste. Not because you are trying to be spiritual, but because your mind is no longer scattered. It is unified, and that unity transforms even ordinary moments into meditation. That doesn't mean you lose your thoughts forever, but they no longer control you. They no longer seduce you with their urgency. You see them coming, you see them going, but you don't follow them. You don't resist them. You just stay. And staying becomes a superpower, because most suffering begins with leaving the moment, leaving the breath, leaving yourself. Samadhi reverses this habit. It brings you back. One of the profound effects of this is how it changes perception. Without mental noise, everything becomes clearer. Colors are brighter. Sounds are clearer. Sensations become more intense. Even emotions, when they arise, are felt more deeply, but with less pain. Because you are not entangled in them, you observe from a place of stillness, and this observation changes everything. In Buddhist teachings, Samadhi is part of a three-part path: ethics, concentration, and wisdom. Concentration is the middle part, the bridge. Without it, wisdom is intellectual. With it, wisdom becomes experience. You don't just know that attachment causes suffering, you feel how holding on disturbs your focus. You don't just believe in impermanence, you see how every breath disappears before you can hold on to it. The candle flame that does not flicker becomes a metaphor for this mind, a mind so stable that nothing can shake it, not because it is armored, but because it is rooted, because it has nothing to defend, no history to protect, no need to flee. It is simply, and in this being, truth appears. To deepen this practice, let your breath be your teacher. Let the rhythm guide you, not as a technique, but as a refuge. Each inhalation is a return. Each exhalation is a letting go. You don't have to try hard. You don't have to hold on to anything. Just stay with it. Let yourself be drawn inward, past the surface tension of the day, into the still core beneath. And when the mind wanders, return. When emotions arise, stay. When thoughts cry out for attention, listen, and then come back. The power lies in the return. The calm lies in the decision, over and over again. Until one day, without warning, the mind no longer wanders. It stays. And in this staying, the flame stabilizes. The storm ends, and the silence that remains is not empty, it is alive. Samadhi is not the goal. It is the foundation. From this place, compassion flows more freely. Decisions are clearer. Joy arises more often, not as a result of external circumstances, but as a side effect of inner stillness. One reacts less. You are less rigid. You are more open. You are more aware. That is why great teachers sit in silence for hours, not because they are escaping life, but because they are touching it more deeply. They do not avoid thoughts, but rest beneath them. And from this rest, wisdom arises. From this silence, strength arises. Not the loud kind, but the kind that remains calm when the whole world is shaking. Tonight, let your mind enter this space. Let it be still without effort. Let your breath guide you to the center. Let the flame stabilize, not because you force it to, but because you no longer disturb it. Let this silence envelop you as you fall asleep. Let it deepen as you rest. Now that the flame of Samadhi has stabilized and the mind has learned to rest in unwavering attention, something unexpected is revealed. That silence does not require silence, and peace does not require silence in the world. Calm can exist in chaos, not as a contradiction, but as a refuge. And this refuge is not found in a remote temple. It is created breath by breath from within. This is the monastery of a breath, where simplicity returns not through isolation, but through presence. There is a kind of clarity that arises when everything superfluous falls away. Not because life has become simpler, but because the mind has stopped adding to it. A monastery has always been a place of silence, devotion, structure, softening the heart and strengthening the mind. But you don't need stone walls or silence to find this. All you need is attention, because a breath, fully felt, fully lived, becomes a temple, not built of bricks, but of presence. Most people believe that peace comes from their surroundings, a clean room, a quiet house, a gentle routine. But this peace is fragile. It depends on things you cannot control. The noise of the world will return, demands will rise again, but the breath is always there. It does not demand perfect conditions, it only demands to be felt. Returning to the breath means returning to simplicity. Not the simplicity of doing less, but the simplicity of simply being. Letting go of mental commentary. Loosening your grip on tasks, identity, and urgency. This is not a rejection of life. It is a deep embrace of what is most real in it. This inhaling, this exhaling, nothing added, nothing taken away. The mind often complicates things. It adds layers, interpretations, goals. It fills the space between one breath and the next with stories and worries. But when you let those go, what remains is pure. It doesn't have to be impressive. It just has to be honest. The breath doesn't lie. It can't pretend. It only reflects what is. In this way, the breath becomes a guide, a teacher, a companion, someone who never leaves, never criticizes, never demands, who only gives. And what it gives is simple. Return. Return from the thoughts. Return from the fear. Return from the distraction. Return to this moment, to this body, to this breath. That is all. And in this return, a sacred space opens up. This space can be found anywhere, in a crowded subway, in a noisy office, in the middle of a difficult conversation. The breath does not need ideal conditions to do its work. It only needs attention. And when that attention is constant, the breath becomes a monastery, a place where the world keeps turning, but you don't. A place where the storm rages on, but the center remains stable. This does not mean that the breath becomes a hiding place. It becomes a place of strength, a place where reactions pause, where clarity is restored, where decisions are made from a place of presence, not panic. It is the place you retreat to, not to escape life, but to encounter it more fully, without the noise, without the spinning and turning, without the endless grasping. You can return to this inner monastery in seconds. One breath. That's all it takes. One conscious inhalation, one slow exhalation. Not to achieve anything, but to remember. To remember that peace is not lost. It is only hidden, and the breath reveals it. Over time, this practice changes your relationship with discomfort. You no longer need the moment to be peaceful, because your peace no longer depends on pleasure. It depends on your presence. The breath becomes a friend in fear, a balm in sadness, an anchor in overwhelm. Not by changing the outside world, but by changing how you encounter it. The beauty of this exercise is its accessibility. You don't need long hours. You don't need the right posture. You don't even need silence, just attention, just the willingness to stop running away. To stop trying to be better, to stop trying so hard to fix something, and instead to feel, to stay, to breathe. This is where healing begins. Not by solving everything, but by being with what is, without resistance. The breath teaches this in a gentle way. Every inhalation opens, every exhalation lets go, and together they create a rhythm, a home, a refuge. Monks may live in stone monasteries, but everyone carries a monastery within themselves, built from mindfulness, supported by simplicity, protected by the breath. And no one can take it away from you. Not noise, not fear, not stress, because it is not outside of you. It is you, the part of you that does not move, that does not rush, that needs nothing more than what is. This way of life transforms ordinary life into a sacred practice. Washing dishes, driving a car, sitting in a waiting room, these become moments of presence, opportunities to return. Each one is a door. Each one is a chance to pause, breathe, and remember, you are already home. This home cannot be destroyed. It cannot be burned. It cannot be stolen, because it was never built from things. It was built from awareness, from silence, from the willingness to stop running and start listening. And the breath is the key, not only to peace, but to truth. The truth that nothing needs to change for peace to arise. That even in grief, under pressure, in uncertainty, there is a place that is untouched, a place where the breath flows freely, where the heart opens gently, where the mind bows to the now. Make this your path, a rhythm of return, a habit of quiet awareness, to a life lived not in flight, but in familiarity with every breath. This is what the monastery of one breath offers. Not an escape from the world, but a deeper entry into it. Completely present, deeply alive. Calm in the storm, not because the storm is over, but because you have stopped looking outside yourself for protection. From the simplicity of a breath in which calm arises without walls, we arrive at a truth that is hidden from our eyes. Tension is not always loud. It is not always in the body. Sometimes it lies in our way of thinking, in how tightly we hold on to what we think should happen, in our attachment to ideas, people, fears, and outcomes. And just like a clenched fist, this mental grip tires us without pause. Tonight, we open that fist, not with force, but with understanding, because when we let go, true relaxation begins. There is a difference between effort and tension. Effort moves, it flows, it adapts, but tension clings, it blocks, it narrows consciousness to a fixed point. This must happen. This must not change. This must be fixed. These beliefs do not always cry out loudly, but they live beneath the surface, fueling fears, creating pressure, and making peace impossible. Buddhism does not say to stop caring. It teaches how to care without clinging. Clinging is subtle. It hides in the desire for things to go a certain way. It hides in the fear of loss, in the need for control, in the refusal to let moments pass. It shows up in thoughts like, what if this ends? Or, what if I fail? Or, why did they say that? These questions sound normal, but they are stuck. They hold on. They trap. And when the mind is trapped, it cannot rest. The path to peace begins with recognizing these little thought fists, not to shame them, not to fight them, but to see them clearly, to gently ask, "Is this holding on?" And if the answer is yes, then breathe and relax and let go. Letting go doesn't mean losing, it means choosing peace over pressure. It's realizing that most of what we pursue, most of what we hold on to, is made up of thoughts. It's not solid, it's not permanent. And even if we held on to it more tightly, that wouldn't guarantee anything. Control doesn't protect, it just exhausts. That doesn't mean giving up. It means relaxing into what cannot be forced. Life does not respond to holding on, it responds to openness. Remember that a clenched hand cannot receive anything. It cannot hold anything gently. It cannot feel anything fully. The same is true of the mind. When it is clenched, life cannot touch it. It only defends itself. When we loosen our mental grip, something new opens up. Not apathy, but clarity. Not laziness, but peace. Because when the need for control disappears, energy returns. Thoughts become lighter. Decisions become easier. Emotions pass more quickly, and even pain feels less sharp because the resistance is gone. That's the paradox. The more we try to hold on, the more we suffer. But when we let go, when we surrender, when we open our fists, we realize that nothing ever belonged to us completely. Not people, not plans, not even peace. These are experiences, not possessions. And when they are experienced freely, they nourish us. When we cling to them, they drain us. Not holding on does not mean indifference. It means intimacy without possession. Being fully present with what is, while allowing it to change. Letting go, letting it live and die at its own pace. That's how nature works. Trees don't hold on to their leaves. Rivers don't cling to their water. The sky doesn't hold on to its clouds. And yet everything moves in a beautiful way. In your own life, you can start by noticing the little tensions. The moment you feel annoyed, ask yourself, what am I holding on to? The moment you feel stressed, ask yourself, what am I afraid of losing? The moment you become impatient, ask yourself, what outcome am I forcing? These are the fists, and every single one of them can unfold as soon as you become aware of them. Letting go also means letting go of self-images. Ideas such as, I am someone who, or they always do that to me. These stories create walls. They don't protect the self, they isolate it, and they increase the pressure to be consistent, to be right, to be recognized. But none of that brings peace. Peace comes from flexibility, from the ability to experience each moment without carrying the past with you. The teachings of Buddha often speak of desire, not only for things, but also for identity, for consistency, for certainty. But life is change, it is movement, it is unpredictability, and every attempt to hold on to it is like holding water in your hands. The harder you squeeze, the less you have. Opening your mental fist is also a way to let go of regret. Regret is just holding on to another moment, trying to hold on to something that has already passed. But the past does not need to be held onto. It needs to be appreciated. You have to learn from it, and then leave it behind. Like a boat that has carried you across the river, but cannot follow you to the shore. The same gentleness applies to relationships. Holding on manifests itself in the need to be understood, to be loved in a certain way, to always be seen in the best light. But none of that can be guaranteed. People see what they see, they change, they forget. And when you let go of how they should be, love becomes freer, lighter. It's less about control and more about presence. Even the desire for enlightenment can become a fist, a clinging to spiritual identity, a subtle pressure to be more peaceful, more alert, more detached. But this pressure is just another form of self-expression. True peace arises when the searching subsides, when presence is enough, when the journey is not about getting somewhere else, but about accepting this moment as enough. Let your breath show you how to do that tonight. Each breath fills your hand. Each exhalation opens it. No pushing, no pulling, just presence. The body knows how to let go. The mind just has to follow. Letting go is a skill. It takes practice. But every time you do it, you feel a freedom that no possession can offer. The freedom of a mind no longer burdened by needs, by holding on, by proving. And that freedom becomes its own reward, its own quiet joy. From here, everything changes. Not because the world is different, but because the one who sees it has become softer, more spacious, less fearful. Now that the fist has opened and the tension of holding on has eased, there is space, a quiet space, not filled with goals or answers, but with possibilities. And in this space, something unexpected becomes valuable. Not more knowledge, not more plans, not more certainty, but the absence of all these things. Emptiness. Not as emptiness, but as a kind of wisdom. The kind that listens instead of speaking. The kind that receives instead of chasing. Tonight, we sit with the image of the empty bowl in front of us, not as something waiting to be filled, but as a form of calm in itself. In Buddhist tradition, the begging bowl is not just a practical object, it is a symbol of a receptive mind, a mind that does not approach life with demands, but with openness. The monk walks with a bowl, not to take, but to allow, to receive without compulsion, to accept what is offered and move on when there is nothing there. This kind of mind, a gently held bowl, open to whatever comes, is the foundation of inner peace. The problem is that most minds are not empty bowls. They are already full of assumptions, conclusions, intentions, opinions, full of desires for things to be a certain way, full of reactions that are charged even before the moment begins. And a full vessel cannot receive anything. It has no room. Even when peace is offered, when clarity knocks, when insight whispers, the full mind misses it, because there is no room. Practicing inner receptivity means starting with emptiness. Not by force, but by loosening your grip on knowledge. It means agreeing to not have an answer, to be okay with not having a plan, to be okay with not being in control, not because these things are unimportant, but because the need for them often displaces the very calm we seek. The receptive mind does not resist the unknown, it welcomes it. It does not fill the silence, it listens to it. It does not immediately label everything, it lets things unfold. This kind of presence feels strange at first, because the world rewards speed, certainty, and cleverness. But in the depths of Buddhist practice, it is the quietest and most humble mind that sees the furthest. This does not mean becoming passive. Receptivity is active. It requires mindfulness. It requires sensitivity. It requires a willingness to remain present with what is, even if it is unpleasant, even if it does not yet make sense. Because some truths do not come as explanations. They come as silence, as a change in breath, as a softening of judgment. The empty bowl is also a teacher of humility. Being receptive means admitting that you don't know something, that you are not always right, that your own perspective may be incomplete. And instead of being a weakness, this becomes a strength, because the empty bowl can always be filled. The full one cannot. In your own life, this exercise begins by observing how quickly your mind jumps to conclusions. Someone speaks, and your mind responds immediately. A problem arises, and the solution comes right away. But what if the answer isn't needed right away? What if waiting, listening, and remaining open a little longer reveals something deeper? This is especially effective in relationships. Most conflicts are not about what is said, but about not being heard. When the mind is full of counter-arguments, judgments, and stories about the other person, there is no room to actually hear them. But when the mind is an empty bowl, you can take them in completely. And often that alone is healing. The same applies to learning. The deepest insights do not come when you want to prove something. They come when you are deeply curious, when you linger in uncertainty long enough for a new perspective to emerge. And this kind of learning is not loud. It is quiet. It takes place beneath the surface, in pauses, in silence, in the willingness to be shaped. The empty bowl is not about giving up intelligence. It's about bringing it into balance. It's about creating space between knowledge and discovery. It's about learning to keep your beliefs loose enough to allow them to evolve. This kind of expansiveness is not only intellectual, but also emotional. Because when the bowl is empty, there is more room for compassion, for nuances, for patience. A closed mind says, "I've seen that before." An open mind says, "Let me see that again with fresh eyes." And in this seeing, things are no longer filtered through assumptions. They are perceived as they are. This is the core of mindfulness, not just noticing what is happening, but accepting it completely without coloring it with stories. This openness also changes how you deal with difficulties. When pain arises, the busy mind asks, "Why is this happening? How can I fix it?" But the open mind says, "This is here now." It holds the pain without adding additional tension. It listens to it. It learns from it. And sometimes in this spaciousness, the pain subsides on its own. Even creativity arises from this emptiness. The best ideas don't come when the mind is searching for solutions, but when it is at rest, while walking, while showering, while breathing. The mind becomes like a clear sky, able to reflect new light, not because it is brilliant, but because it is clear. This kind of clarity cannot be forced. It must be invited, and it is invited through presence, through humility, through emptiness. That is why so many monks speak in questions rather than answers. That is why so many masters say, "I don't know," not because they are confused, but because they are clear enough to let things reveal themselves in their own time. Tonight, let your mind become that bowl. Let it rest without having to explain anything. Let it loosen its grip on conclusions. Let it become receptive, not just to peace, but to life, to the breath, to sensations, to the sound of silence itself. For in this silence, life begins to flow in, not all at once, but slowly, gently, as it always has been. And with each breath, the bowl fills again, not with noise, but with clarity, with understanding that arises from silence, with truths that do not need to be spoken to be known. Now that the bowl of the mind is empty and presence has turned into receptivity, the next step reveals itself not as a leap, but as silence. A deeper kind of silence, one that remains steady when waves arise. A silence that does not close itself off even in discomfort. This is equanimity, not the absence of feelings, but the ability to remain balanced within them. The mind becomes like a pond so still that even the winds of emotion pass by without leaving a ripple. There is a misunderstanding in the world about peace. Many believe it means the absence of emotion, a kind of numbness or detachment. But equanimity is something much more alive. It is not about suppressing what you feel. It is about allowing the entire spectrum of emotions without being carried away by them. It is about keeping your heart open even when the waves are high. Emotions come in waves. They swell with sadness, grow with joy, break with anger, rise with fear. This is natural. This is human. What causes suffering is not the wave itself, but the mind's reaction to it. The panic to flee, the desire to expand, the fear of feeling. Equanimity breaks this cycle. It teaches the body and mind to stay, not in a rigid way, but in a gentle, unshakable way, like a pond reflecting the sky without becoming the storm above it. This training begins by noticing how quickly the mind reacts. When discomfort arises, observe how it tries to explain it, blame it, run away from it. These are habits, ingrained patterns of avoidance or control. But equanimity means sitting with the emotion and not moving away from it, observing it fully without trying to suppress or amplify it, allowing it to exist without letting it take control. This does not mean coldness. In fact, equanimity creates space for warmth. Since you are no longer controlled by emotions, you can meet them with compassion. You can say, "Ah, there's sadness," instead of, "I'm broken." You can say, "That's anger," without being overwhelmed by it. You hold it in your awareness just as you hold a cup in your hand, without denying it, without dropping it, just seeing it clearly. The pond does not resist the rain. It absorbs every drop, but it doesn't lose its shape. It doesn't panic and overflow. That is the essence of serenity, inner stability, the ability to feel deeply without falling apart. And the secret to this balance is practice, not in suppressing emotions, but in not letting them carry you away. You start with small moments, a moment of impatience, a hint of anger, the tension before speaking. These are small waves. When you notice them, pause. Don't push them away. Don't feed them either. Just notice them. Let them pass without reacting. This will build up your strength to cope with bigger waves when they come. As your composure increases, your nervous system responds. You feel less taken by surprise, less shaken by judgments, less influenced by praise or criticism, because your center is no longer based on external circumstances. It is anchored in mindfulness. And when mindfulness is consistent, it becomes an unshakable refuge. Equanimity is especially important in relationships. When someone else is emotional, the reactive mind wants to go along with it or fight against it. But the balanced mind listens. It doesn't need to win or fix anything. It simply remains present. This presence calms not only you, but also the other person, because it's rare to encounter a mind that doesn't try to change the moment, but simply accepts it. Even in joy, equanimity has value. It allows you to feel fully without attachment, to enjoy deeply without fearing the end. Because equanimity is not indifference, it is intimacy without attachment. It is the knowledge that everything is welcome and will pass. This does not make life boring, it makes life deeper. Emotions become teachers. Anger teaches boundaries. Sadness teaches depth. Fear teaches vigilance. Joy teaches connectedness. But you can only learn these lessons if you don't run away. When the pond is still enough to reflect, there are exercises to cultivate this. Body scans, where you notice sensations without naming them. Breath awareness, which remains calm while feelings arise. Mantras that remind you, this too is just a wave. But more than any technique, it is the intention that counts. The willingness not to flee from your own experiences. Equanimity is also what makes forgiveness possible. Because when you are not dominated by pain, you can alleviate it. When you are not burning with reactions, you can see others more clearly, not through the lens of your own hurts, but through the constancy of your presence. In Buddhist texts, equanimity is one of the 4 immeasurable qualities. Together with loving kindness, compassion, and joy, it completes the heart. Without it, the others falter. Compassion becomes exhaustion. Joy becomes attachment. Kindness becomes dependence. But equanimity holds everything together, grounded, steady, clear. Living this way does not mean that you do not cry, get angry, or sometimes break down. It means that you know how to find your way back, how to sit quietly with yourself after the storm, how to touch your own heart with calm hands, how to be both moved and untouched. That is why serenity is not a skill reserved for monks. It is for anyone who no longer wants to be ruled by their emotions, for anyone who wants to feel without drowning, who wants to care without burning out, who wants to be touched by life without being torn apart by it. Tonight, let the pond of your mind become still. Don't view emotions as threats or mistakes, but as movement, as something temporary, powerful, but not dangerous to a mind that doesn't fight back. With each breath, let the silence return, not because the waves stop, but because the surface stops fighting. From the waveless pond of serenity, where emotions move without taking over, we now wade into something deeper, something most avoid, but all must encounter. Decay, change, loss. These are not disruptions in life. This is life. And tonight, we turn to them not with fear, but with clarity. For what breaks also teaches, what ends also reveals. In Buddhism, this is not considered morbid. It is called wisdom. The Dharma of decay is not about resignation. It is about relief. The relief that comes when the mind no longer tries to maintain a world that is designed to change. Everything in life changes. Bodies age. Friendships evolve. Beliefs change. Seasons change. What begins eventually ends. But that is not a tragedy. It is a rhythm. When the mind accepts this rhythm, something inside lets go. Not in despair, but in gentleness. Fear arises when one resists this truth. When you pretend that things can remain the same, perfectly preserved and protected from time. But when the pretense ends, peace emerges. The mind wants certainty. It builds a future in its head, forging plans to keep everything as it is. It resists signs of aging, fears changes in relationships, clings to temporary states. But it is precisely the effort to stop change that wears on the soul. Accepting change does not mean liking every moment. It means letting go of the fight against time itself. Then, calm begins to spread. Transience is not just something that happens in the outside world, it also happens inside. Thoughts fade, emotions shift, desires arise and pass away. Identity itself changes. Recognizing this clearly is liberating, because when everything is constantly changing, no experience, no matter how intense, can hold you captive. Suffering loses its permanence. So does fear and sadness. This realization brings peace, not by promising that everything will stay good, but by showing that nothing is stuck. Even pain moves, even confusion subsides. The moment the mind stops resisting decay, its grip loosens, and in this loosening, space opens up, a breath that goes deeper than control, a calmness that is unaffected by the outcome. The body is a teacher of this. With every breath, the cells change. Muscles tense and relax again. The skin ages, the hair turns gray. Trying to stop this is like trying to stop the tide. But when you bow to the transience of the body, it becomes sacred, not because it lasts, but because it is transient. Every breath is a gift that will never be repeated. Every heartbeat is a reminder to be in the here and now, because this very moment will never come again. The Dharma of decay is not about giving up. It is about letting go of the illusion that anything was ever meant to last forever. And that includes emotional states. No feeling is permanent, not even the ones that feel endless. Depression passes, fears fade, even numbness disappears eventually. Time, when allowed to flow freely, carries everything with it. Even the burdens you thought would never leave you. This does not mean becoming passive. It means responding without attachment, being fully present, even when things fall apart. Loving deeply, even when you know that what you love will change. To live with presence, not because it guarantees comfort, but because it honors the truth. Death is also part of this teaching. Not just physical death, but also the small deaths that happen every day. The end of a chapter, letting go of an identity, realizing that something that was once important is no longer needed. These losses can feel like failure, but they are a transformation in motion. And when you meet them with silence, they reveal a deeper level of life, one where the heart is open, not because it is untouched, but because it has been softened by letting go. This softness is strength. It allows you to live through endings without closing yourself off, to face uncertainty without breaking down, to accept loss without bitterness, and to feel gratitude for what was, even if it is no longer. Nature shows us this all the time. Leaves fall, fruit rots, mountains erode, but there is no panic, no clinging, only change. And somehow, beauty emerges from it. A flower that blooms for only one day is still worth seeing. A sunset that fades in a few minutes still moves the soul, not despite its transience, but precisely because of it. In this way, practice becomes an exercise in remembering. When fear arises, Remember, this too shall pass. When joy arises, don't try to hold on to it. Enjoy it to the fullest, and then let it go. When something breaks, don't panic. See what space it frees up. When something ends, gently ask, what begins now? Because in Buddhism, nothing is ever really lost. It is only transformed. This perspective does not erase grief, but reshapes it. It allows you to feel it without being overwhelmed by it. Cry and then breathe. Grieve and then rest. Grief does not become a wall, but a door, a movement, a process, and the more you trust it, the more you heal. Not immediately, not cleanly, but honestly. Even your identity is affected. Who you are today is not who you were last year or last week. The mind changes. The heart evolves. What is important changes. This is not instability. It is growth. And the more the mind stops clinging to what it thinks it is, the more room there is for becoming. The Dharma of decay also helps with forgiveness, because when you see how much you change, it becomes easier to accept that others can change too, that mistakes can fade, that wounds can heal, that nothing is set in stone. This is not wishful thinking. It is the realization that the same law that touches your life touches every life. Let this truth calm you tonight. Let go of the effort to hold everything together. Let things fall where they fall. Let time shape what it must shape. Let old versions of yourself melt away in silence. Let peace arise not from control, but from trust. For when the heart trusts the nature of change, it no longer resists its own unfolding. From the quiet acceptance of life's natural fractures, where the mind stops resisting change, we now turn to something equally powerful, but far more subtle, the nature of thought itself. For what bubbles beneath the surface is not always as fresh or true as it feels. In fact, most thoughts are not truths of the moment. They are echoes, delayed reactions, remnants of something that has already passed. Once you realize this, a new level of freedom opens up, because the noise of the mind loses its urgency the moment it is recognized as an old sound. Thoughts come quickly and present themselves as facts. They comment, they predict, they narrate, and most people believe them without questioning them. But the mind is not a real-time instrument. It reacts, it filters, interprets, delays. What you believe you are experiencing is often just the mind catching up, providing an explanation, a judgment, a conclusion. But explanations are not experiences. And when this delay is recognized, the grip of thinking loosens. A thought may say, "This is too much." But the actual moment may be calm. The thought may scream, "I failed," while the body simply rests. It may repeat an argument that took place hours ago, or rehearse one that has not yet taken place. These are not truths. They are recordings, echoes of emotional waves that linger long after the wave has subsided. That doesn't make thoughts the enemy. It makes them something to observe more gently, more skeptically. Like when you hear a voice in a cave. You don't run away because you hear the sound. You recognize that it is delayed, distorted, shaped by the space it moves through. The mind works in a similar way. It processes based on history, on patterns, by fear, by desires. But none of that makes what it says a reliable mirror of the moment. That's why so many thoughts repeat themselves. The mind doesn't invent anything. It recycles. It replays memories. It amplifies old stories. It repeats interpretations. That's not because the mind is flawed. It's because it's conditioned. It's designed to protect, predict, prepare. But these functions often go beyond the limits of the present. They color it with worries. They drown it in judgments. They blur it with past pain. Buddhism does not ask you to stop thinking. It invites you to question your automatic belief in thoughts, to pause long enough to ask, is this thought a reflection of the present or an echo of the past? And most of the time, you will find that the latter is the case. In this gap between mind and moment, awareness arises, and it is awareness that transforms noise into insight. When this becomes practice, something changes. Your reaction time slows down, not because you suppress thoughts, but because you don't obey them immediately. A thought arises, and instead of reacting to it, you observe it. You notice how it changes, how it fades, how the emotion that accompanied it subsides simply by your noticing it. This is how the grip of mental noise begins to loosen, not through silence, but through space. This space reveals another truth. Just because a thought is loud does not mean it is important. Just because it is persistent does not mean it is true. The mind often screams when it is uncertain. It repeats itself when it is afraid. It demands when it feels ignored. But presence does not have to scream. Presence is silent. And the more attention shifts from the thought to the present moment, the clearer this silence becomes. Emotional echoes are particularly strong. A comment someone made years ago still resonates. A mistake still haunts you, not because it is still happening, but because the echo has not faded away. These are the loops that people get stuck in, not because they are trapped in events, but because they are trapped in delayed thoughts about the events. And recognizing the delay breaks the spell. You can even observe this in physical reactions. The body tenses up before the mind can identify the reason. The stomach cramps before the thought arises. This shows that the experience happens first. The interpretation comes later. And often the interpretation is inaccurate. It's a guess, a story. And once you see this story unfold in slow motion, you can let it pass like the weather. This does not mean ignoring your thoughts. It means dealing with them differently, with gentleness, with curiosity. You don't ask, what does this thought want me to do? Instead, you ask, where does this thought come from? And often it comes from habit, from the past, from fear that tries to disguise itself with the mask of logic. But you don't have to believe every mask. This approach also helps in conversations. Instead of reacting to what is said, notice the thoughts that arise. Let the first reaction pass. Respond from a place of clarity rather than from an echo. This makes communication clearer, less defensive, more down to earth. Meditation helps to sharpen this awareness, not by stopping thoughts, but by making the delay visible. You sit there and your thoughts race, but over time, you notice that the waves come later than your breath. You feel the difference between a direct sensation and the mind's commentary on it. And in this awareness, peace begins. Because you realize that the moment does not need to be fixed. It needs to be felt. Thoughts as echoes also explain why people sometimes feel fear for no reason. The original cause is gone, but the mind has not caught up yet. It is still playing the old sound. And without this awareness, you believe that the fear must be current. But it is not. It is a remnant, a delay. And once you recognize it, you can let it go. The more you see thoughts in this way, the more compassion arises for yourself, for others, because you understand that most of what people say and do has nothing to do with the present. It has to do with the past. They are responding to echoes, just like you sometimes do. And when that is clear, forgiveness comes more easily. So does patience. Tonight, when thoughts arise, pay attention to their tone. Are they talking about what lies ahead, or about something that is already over? Are they responding to the present, or ruminating on the past? Let each thought arise, echo, and pass. Don't hold it back. Don't chase after it. Just let the echo fade away on its own. This will make the signal clearer. This is how silence arises, not from silence itself, but from not following the noise. From the moment we recognize thoughts as echoes, delayed, reactive, often outdated, the mind began to loosen its grip. It became clear that not everything that arises within us deserves attention, and that not all mental noises correspond to reality. But now, an even more subtle change is calling us forward. Beneath the thoughts, between the words, in the silence they leave behind, there is something else, not emptiness, but living silence. And in this silence, the deepest form of peace begins. It does not arise from more thinking. It arises from learning to listen to what is not said. There is a space between thoughts, just as there is between spoken words. Most people do not perceive it because their minds are trained to search for meaning, analyze content, and remain active. But peace is never found in noise. It is found in the pause before the next thought arises. It is found in the silence that surrounds every word, like the sky surrounds the clouds. When you touch this silence, the mind comes to rest, not because it has solved something, but because it has remembered something simpler than solving: being. This exercise is not about removing thoughts. It is about shifting your attention. Instead of clinging to the content of your thoughts, you begin to settle into the space around them. Like the silence before a bell rings, the silence that holds the sound, the silence between heartbeats. This is not conceptual, it is direct, it is subtle, and it changes your life once you recognize it. The mind works quickly because it believes that thinking is essential for survival. It jumps from one point to the next, filling the space with explanations, plans, and judgments. But none of this brings true peace. Peace begins in the pause, not because the pause is empty, but because it is full in a different way, full of presence, full of depth, full of awareness that is not pursuing anything. You can start this exercise by listening, not to music, not to voices, but to the silence itself. Sit down for a moment and pay attention to where the sound stops, not just the absence of noise, but the quality of the silence beneath it. This silence is not passive. It is alert. It is alive. And the more you engage with it, the more the mind stops filling it with thoughts. The same is true of mental silence. You think, and then there is a gap, a few seconds without words. Most people don't notice this, but this gap is the gateway. It is the place where you stop being a thinker and begin to be consciousness itself. Thoughts are loud. Presence is silent. But silence is not empty. It is complete in a different way. Words are tools. But space is the canvas. Without it, nothing can be seen clearly. When the mind lives only in words, it becomes like a song without pauses, constant noise, no rhythm, no beauty. But when it begins to feel the space between the notes, it begins to understand music, not just sounds. That is what this exercise invites you to do. Not just more inner dialogue, but awareness of the silence that gives meaning to thinking. In conversation, this shows up in pauses before speaking. Don't answer too quickly. Let what has been said sink in. This allows for deeper understanding. It creates space for insights, for empathy, and more importantly, it allows both conversation partners to connect without filling every second with noise. This is what makes silence so powerful, not as an absence, but as a presence. Mental gaps can also become noticeable during meditation. You sit there and your thoughts move. One pops up, then another, but between them there is a fraction of a second when there is nothing. No unconsciousness, just consciousness without content. Stay there, not by force, but by noticing it, by deciding not to follow the next thought. This is how space grows. It becomes familiar. It becomes safe. The reason most people avoid silence is that it feels unfamiliar. But silence is not empty. It is just different. It does not entertain. It does not matter. But it calms something that is older than words. The nervous system responds to it. The breath slows down. The chest relaxes. Not because of something that has been said, but because of what can remain unsaid. In this space, healing begins. Because without constant thoughts, the pain begins to dissolve. Tensions ease. There is no pressure to fix, explain, or name anything. Just be. Just be present. And in this presence, the heart speaks, not loudly, not with words, but with a knowledge that needs no translation. Listening to the mental space also trains patience, because you no longer fill every gap. You wait, you allow, you are quiet long enough to see what emerges naturally instead of what the mind tries to force. And in this silence, deeper truths come to light, not those created by thinking, but those revealed by silence. This is also where creativity arises. The best ideas come from silence, not from constant thinking. The mind needs space to receive, to imagine, to rearrange things, but it cannot receive anything if it is constantly talking. Silence becomes a breeding ground for insights, not through coercion, but through invitation. You don't have to meditate for hours to feel this. Just pause after a sentence. Breathe after a thought. Notice the pause between inhaling and exhaling. All of these are doors. They don't lead to more doing, they lead to presence. And the more often you walk through them, the more natural they become. Eventually, life itself begins to slow down. Not because time is changing, but because you are no longer trying to fill it. You rest in it. You listen to its rhythm, and life has a rhythm that is far more peaceful than the mind normally allows. This is not escapism. It is a deeper connection. Silence does not mean withdrawing from life. It means giving yourself to it completely, without distraction or distortion. You encounter the moment as it is, not overlaid with ideas, but unadulterated and whole. This kind of encounter changes you. It calms you not by dulling your senses, but by refining them. And from this refinement comes clarity. Decisions become easier, reactions become milder, relationships deepen, not because you have done more, but because you have said less, thought less, and listened more, to the space, to your breath, to the quiet voice beneath the noise. Let that voice be heard tonight, not with volume, but with presence. Hear every breath, not just the inhaling and exhaling, but also the pause in between. Let the silence between thoughts become a place of refuge, not because it hides you, but because it reveals you. From the silence between thoughts, where calm begins to take shape, a new kind of strength emerges. Not the strength to try harder or remain rigid, not the discipline of cold routines or forced silence, but something deeper, quieter, and more sustainable. Discipline that doesn't hurt, structure that doesn't suffocate. This is the path of the gentle warrior who acts with compassion instead of control and discovers a calmness that does not break even under pressure. For a long time, the mind has been trained to obey through coercion, to be disciplined by guilt, to be controlled by harshness. Get up earlier, do more, feel nothing, try harder. These methods may produce results, but they rarely lead to inner peace. They leave behind tension, constant inner pressure, and the conviction that you have to earn your worth through struggle. The gentle warrior trains differently, not by shouting at their mind, but by gently guiding it, not by punishing mistakes, but by patiently returning to the path again and again. Discipline rooted in compassion becomes devotion. It ceases to be a struggle and becomes a rhythm. Not something you have to do, but something you choose to do because you see how it nourishes your peace of mind. This kind of discipline does not arise from fear of failure. It arises from a love of clarity. It is the quiet decision to be there for yourself, not perfect, but consistent. The gentle warrior does not wake up to conquer the world, but to meet it. He sits quietly in the morning, not because it is required, but because it reminds him of who he is beneath all the noise. His movements are not rushed. His words are not wasted. He does not sprint through life to prove his worth. He moves with presence because that is where peace resides. This path does not reject structure, it brings it back. It does not see routine as a prison, but as a framework that surrounds something sacred. A morning walk, a moment of silence before meals, a pause before answering. These are not rigid rules, they are gentle rituals. They create space in which awareness can arise, and in this awareness, the mind stops spinning. Compassionate discipline also changes how we deal with our own emotions. When the mind is wild, the harsh inner voice wants to silence it. You shouldn't feel that. You're failing again. But the gentle warrior listens. He doesn't believe everything the mind says, but he doesn't attack it either. He guides it back with patience, with breath, with steady steps. This does not mean that gentleness turns into laziness. The gentle warrior is committed, but his commitment is pure. It is not driven by shame. It is not fueled by the need to prove himself. It is rooted in understanding. He has seen what happens when the mind remains untrained, how it creates suffering, how it clings, how it panics. That is why he sticks with the practice, not to earn peace, but to return to it. Mindful discipline is also forgiving. If you skip a day, it doesn't lead to a downward spiral. When the mind wanders, it is not punished. It is noticed and brought back. This return is the practice. It is not about perfect presence. It is about constant readiness. This is how calm becomes stable, not through control, but through compassion that never disappears. This approach also changes how you interact with others. When you stop demanding perfection from yourself, you stop demanding it from others. You understand that everyone is doing their best. Everyone is learning. Everyone forgets, and everyone returns. This creates space in your relationships. Patience grows. Tensions dissolve. Because you have stopped using force as your primary means of interaction. Even productivity changes. You continue to get things done, but you don't wear yourself out in the process. You rest when you're tired. You act when you're ready. You don't focus because you have to, but because your mind has learned to be still. This is a different kind of strength. It doesn't flash, it doesn't dominate, but it lasts. The gentle warrior also knows how to say no, not out of anger, but out of clarity, not because of rules, but because it suits them. They choose what nourishes their inner peace and let go of what disturbs it. This makes their life simpler, not smaller, but more conscious. Every action springs from awareness, not urgency. Therein lies a strength that most people overlook, a quiet determination, a quiet discipline. You don't always see it on the surface, but it's there, in the way they breathe through difficulties, in the way they return to the mat even when they are distracted, in the way they speak kindly to themselves after a setback. That is the warrior within them, not the fighter, but the one who always returns to the present. Over time, this kind of discipline shapes the nervous system. The body stops tensing up all the time. The mind stops fearing silence. The heart softens and finds a rhythm of caring. Not because everything is easy, but because the relationship with challenges has changed. It's no longer about dominance, it's about dedication. This discipline is taught with every breath, every time you sit down, even if you are distracted, every time you pause instead of reacting, every time you leave space for silence instead of filling it with noise. Every moment becomes a workout. Every return becomes a muscle. And over time, your mind becomes calm. Not always silent, but calm enough to listen, calm enough to decide. Let your discipline be gentle tonight. Let it guide you back without judgment. Let it walk beside you instead of pushing you forward. Let your strength come not from how loud you are, but from how quiet you remain when everything else gets loud. From the quiet power of compassionate discipline, where strength is replaced by presence, we now come to the smallest movements of everyday life, those that are most overlooked, those that often happen in passing. This is where the practice deepens, not in great efforts, but in subtle decisions. And one of those decisions is attention, not just concentrated effort, but a gentle, continuous attention that flows through everything. This is the tea ceremony of attention, a way of transforming life itself into meditation, not through withdrawal, but through the way you touch each moment. There is something sacred in simplicity, not because it is dramatic or profound, but because it is lived to the full. Tea making becomes a gateway, not for the sake of tea, but because of what it reveals about the quality of mindfulness behind every movement. You fill the kettle, you wait, you pour, you hold the cup. And when your attention is fully present, every step becomes rich. Time slows down, the senses awaken, and the mind, accustomed to hustle and bustle, begins to relax. It's not about doing something unusual, it's about doing the ordinary in an unusual way, with presence, with care, with silence behind the movement. It's not the task that changes you, it's the way you do it. The same goes for washing dishes, folding laundry, or putting on your shoes. Every action becomes a form of stillness when performed with full awareness. The tea ceremony is a metaphor for this way of life. Every step is deliberate, not rushed, not thoughtless. It invites you into a kind of rhythm that brings you back from the storm of your thoughts to the simplicity of the moment. When the hand moves slowly, the mind follows. When the cup is held with care, the heart finds peace. When no part of the process is skipped, life ceases to be something to get through. It becomes something to be with. In this way, calmness becomes a way of life and not just a goal of meditation. When attention permeates everyday life, the nervous system finds its regulation not only during the practice, but also between practices. The mind stops jumping back and forth between tasks and begins to move with them. The body stops resisting the next task and begins to open up to the task at hand. Even the breathing changes. During these small mindfulness exercises, the breathing deepens naturally. The heart rate slows down. The chatter of the mind falls silent, not because you force it to, but because it no longer has any power. This is the power of conscious mindfulness. It does not push the mind away, but gently guides it home. The most important thing in this exercise is to remember. Notice when you get lost in distractions, and then gently return to the present action. This return is everything. That is the whole journey. Whether you are holding a teacup, tying your shoelaces, or closing a door, it is not about the action. It is about the quality of mind with which you perform it. Are you present, or are you rushing ahead? Do you feel what you are holding in your hands, or are you lost in thought? This does not mean that every moment will be profound. Some will be boring, some will be loud, some will be accompanied by frustration or fatigue. But even these moments can be met with attention. You don't need peace and quiet to practice. You practice to find peace and quiet. And sometimes the practice is simply to become aware that you are distracted and to remain kind to yourself as you return. Mindfulness is not a compulsion. It is an invitation. It says, "Come back. This moment is enough." And this message, repeated throughout the day, becomes a kind of healing. You stop chasing intensity and begin to trust the present moment. You no longer need special circumstances and begin to find the sacred in what is already there. This way of life also strengthens resilience. Because when life gets chaotic, the habit of mindfulness keeps you going. The mind doesn't spin in circles so quickly. The breath stays calmer. The body feels safer, not because you're in control of everything, but because you're fully present, completely and utterly. And this presence provides stability. When tea becomes meditation, everything else becomes meditation too. Eating slows down. Walking becomes quieter. Conversations become deeper, not because of what is said, but because you are fully present to listen. Distractions are still there, but they lose their influence. You have trained yourself to come back, to pause, to feel. Even boredom is transformed. What once felt boring becomes rich. What once felt repetitive becomes a rhythm. Attention reveals the texture of everything: warm water on your hands, the weight of a cup, the sound of your breath through your nose. None of this is spectacular, but everything is alive, and being with this aliveness is the beginning of true contentment. This practice also nourishes gratitude. When you are present with what you are doing, you begin to appreciate it, not as a concept, but as a felt sensation. Gratitude is not always a big feeling. Sometimes it is the quiet gratitude that arises when you are fully present, when you taste your tea, when you hear your footsteps, when you feel your heartbeat. Over time, mindfulness becomes less about effort and more about flavor. It becomes a way to spice up your life, a way to approach every moment with care, not because it's perfect, but because it's real. This is how peace arises, not from what happens, but from how fully you are present. Make this your ceremony tonight. Whatever you are doing right now, even as you listen, can be the bowl, the teacup, the breath, the anchor. Don't let your mind rest in silence, but in gentleness. Let your actions be gentle. Let your pace be slow enough to feel what is really happening. Through the gentle practice of filling everyday life with mindfulness, where even tea becomes a path to presence, the mind begins to reveal its deeper patterns. And one of the most obvious patterns, once you are quiet enough to notice it, is the loop. The repetition. The thought that arises not because it belongs to the moment, but because it has not been detached from the past. These are ghost thoughts. They are not real in the present, but they are nevertheless omnipresent. They echo without roots, and the more you believe them, the more the present becomes a shadow of what has already passed. There is a moment in practice when this becomes obvious. You sit still or go about your daily business, and suddenly the mind brings back an old scene, a mistake, a memory, a conversation that ended years ago, and for a moment it feels urgent. But when you look closely, you realize this is not now. It is a ghost, and it only has power if you follow it. Ghost thoughts are persistent because they are linked to emotions. They are colored by guilt, anger, sadness, or fear. This is how they slip by unnoticed, because the feeling makes them seem real. But they are not new. They are echoes, mental recordings that repeat themselves. They did not arise in this moment. They arose from the remnants of moments you have not yet let go of. Buddhism teaches that the mind clings, not only to pleasure or identity, but also to pain. Not because it enjoys it, but because it believes it still needs it. That somehow, by reliving the pain, security is created. That repeating failure prevents it from happening again. But this is a mistake. The repetitions of the mind are not always wisdom. Often they are habits, and habits can be changed if you recognize them clearly. Recognizing mental loops begins with mindfulness. When a familiar loop arises, pause. Ask yourself, is this happening right now, or has it already happened? Does this thought belong to this breath, or am I trying something that isn't even there? This moment of questioning creates space, and in this space, the loop can lose its hold. It's also important to understand that these thoughts are not your fault. They are the result of what the mind is trained to do: protect, prepare, process. But when left unchecked, they stop protecting and start poisoning. They whisper things like, "You should have known better," or "They were wrong and you never drew a line." But these whispers don't help you. They keep you trapped in cycles that offer no solution in the present. Ghost thoughts thrive in silence, unless that silence is conscious. They need ignorance to survive. But when the light of mindfulness shines on them, they begin to dissolve. Not because you suppress them, but because they cannot withstand the truth of the present moment. They lose their power when you stop arguing with them, when you stop replaying them over and over again, when you stop letting them become real again by giving them your attention. You don't have to fight them. Fighting gives them energy. Observe them. Say, "Ah, there it is again," and return to your breathing, to your body, to the sound, to the now, and they pass away, not because you have won, but because you have stopped feeding the echo. Over time, this exercise becomes easier. You begin to recognize the taste of certain thoughts. You feel the familiar pull of an old story and know that's exactly what it is, a story. You don't have to rewrite it. You just stop reading it over and over again. And when new pains arise, because they will, you meet them differently. You allow them, feel them, live through them completely so they don't become another ghost. You process them in real time. You cry when the moment calls for it. You speak when the truth is ready. You don't repress anything, because what is repressed becomes a burden. What is felt is let go. Many people live surrounded by these ghosts and unknowingly carry the past with them into every room, every relationship, every decision. Not because they want to, but because they have never learned to recognize the repetition. They confuse familiar pain with the current truth. But it is not the same thing. When you learn to recognize this, your inner space becomes free. Your mind becomes lighter. Emotions no longer pile up on top of each other. You begin to experience the present as it is, not as a filter through the past. This changes how you react to others. You stop taking every tone of voice personally. You stop projecting old wounds onto new faces. You stop carrying other people's voices around in your head as if they still belong there. Not because you suppress them, but because you have acknowledged them and let them go. In silence, thoughts that you thought you had gotten rid of often return. Not because silence creates them, but because it reveals them. And that is a gift, because only what becomes visible can be let go. You notice how your mind repeats a conversation from 10 years ago and realize that this is not a sign that something is wrong, but a call to return. Back to the present, to the truth that there is nothing left to fix in this moment, because this moment no longer exists. Even your identity can be shaped by ghost thoughts. I'm not someone who, or I always mess things up when. These are not truths. They are memories disguised as rules. And when these memories are no longer fed, your identity becomes freer. You cease to be the sum of what has happened. You begin to be the sum of what you perceive. Make this your exercise for tonight. Not to chase away the ghosts, just to see them clearly, to notice what comes up and gently ask, is this a visitor from the present or a shadow from the past? If it's a shadow, you don't have to banish it. You just stop running into it. You let it pass like smoke, like wind through an open window. Now that the ghost thoughts have been recognized for what they are, echoes of something that has already passed, the mind begins to breathe again. Lighter, less entangled. But even beneath these repetitive loops lies something deeper, something quieter, but far more influential. The constant story of me, the identity that forms like a sand mandala, each grain carefully shaped by memories, emotions, culture, fears, desires, and like a mandala, it is complex, beautiful, but not made to last forever. Tonight, we enter this pattern, not to destroy it, but to dissolve it. Not out of loss, but to find peace beneath the image we have of ourselves. Most of what we believe about ourselves did not begin with us. It was given to us, repeated, shaped, over years, through the words of our parents, the expectations of society, reactions to praise or pain. And slowly, these impressions solidified. I am the fearful one. I am the strong one. I always mess everything up. I never finish anything. These labels became identity, and identity became habit. But the danger lies not only in labeling, it lies in believing that it is permanent. A fixed identity creates tension, because it tries to freeze something that is constantly moving. The mind, like everything else, is fluid. But when it believes, this is who I am, it builds walls. And those walls become prisons. They resist change. They fear challenges. They defend themselves instead of giving in. And over time, that defense becomes exhaustion. Buddhism does not teach you to become a better person. It invites you to realize that there has never been anyone who was unchanging. Only sensations, thoughts, tendencies, changing like wind patterns, flowing like rivers, no fixed self, only the illusion of one, created by repetition and reinforced by attachment. When you realize this clearly, something incredible happens. The pressure to always be yourself begins to ease. You stop playing to an imaginary audience. You stop protecting an image that doesn't have to be real. And peace returns, not because you have become more, but because you have let go of the need to be something specific. This does not make you empty, it makes you expansive. Without a fixed identity to preserve, you become more present, more flexible, more honest. You don't try to live up to a story, but respond to what is real. You don't have to be the calm one. You don't have to be the broken one. You are simply what is true in this moment. And that truth can change with every breath. The metaphor of the sand mandala helps here. In Tibetan tradition, monks spend hours, sometimes even days, creating a mandala out of colored grains of sand. Elaborate, beautiful. And when it is finished, they sweep it away. Not out of sadness, out of understanding, that nothing is meant to last forever, that beauty can exist without attachment, that peace does not come from preservation, but from participation. Your identity is like that, something that has been shaped over time, something to be cherished, but also something that is allowed to change. The person you were a year ago no longer exists. The version of you from your childhood no longer exists. Even the person you were this morning has changed slightly. It is an illusion to believe that a single version of you was ever the whole truth. This realization should not unsettle you, but liberate you. Because when the self is not fixed, growth becomes natural. You are not betraying yourself when you evolve. You are not fake when you change. You respond to the present with a mind that is no longer trapped in old patterns. Even emotions are shaped by identity. If you believe, I am an angry person, anger becomes an expectation. If you believe, I am weak, fear becomes a habit. But these are roles, not facts. They are chapters, not the whole book. And when the mind no longer clings to a single storyline, new responses can emerge, gentler ones, wiser ones. This also changes our relationships with others. When you stop defining your own identity, you stop defining the identities of others. You stop seeing people as static labels. The difficult one, the selfish one, the one who always disappoints. And in this softening, compassion grows. Not as an exercise, but as a byproduct of seeing others as changeable too. Dissolving identity does not mean losing boundaries. It means allowing those boundaries to be shaped by presence rather than old definitions. You can still say no, you can still walk away, but not out of ego, but out of clarity. Not to defend who you think you are, but to take care of what is truly unfolding. This fluidity also brings creativity. When you don't try to stay consistent, you can try new things. You can surprise yourself. You can fail without it becoming a personal crisis. You can learn faster because you're not protecting your image, you're promoting your growth. It also makes transitions easier. Endings hurt less. Beginnings feel less stressful because you're not dragging a heavy self through every door. You move easily. You let history breathe. You see every day as part of the mandala, not as the final version, but as part of a living design that is meant to change. Meditation reveals this in a gentle way. If you sit long enough, you will see it, how the feeling of I flickers, how it tenses up with your thoughts, how it relaxes with your breath. In some moments, it disappears completely, and what remains is not emptiness, it is peace. A presence without a label, a silence without boundaries, a mind without armor. In this space, fear also loses its sharpness, because most fears relate to the self. Fear of being hurt, fear of being seen, fear of not being good enough. But when the self is not held so tightly, these fears do not stick. They pass by like wind through open windows, not because you are detached, but because you no longer have anything to hold on to. Let your story be sand tonight. Let it fall away. Let it scatter. Not as erasure, but as freedom. You are no longer the person you were yesterday. You are not the person your thoughts describe. You are not your pain. You are not your past. You are something softer, something closer to breath than name. From the gentle detachment from identity, where the self no longer clings to labels or stories, something deeper and more primal begins to call. Not from within the mind, but from outside, from the body, from the earth, from the spaces where thought fades and rhythm speaks. This rhythm has no words, but it has a language that the nervous system remembers. Tonight, we don't breathe to control the body, but to reconnect it with the world. We learn to breathe with the trees, slowly, deeply, calmly, and in doing so, we begin to calm not only the mind, but the entire system that supports it. There is something about trees that calms the nervous system even before a single thought arises. Their silence testifies to a different kind of intelligence. Their movements, guided only by the wind, the sun, and time, invite us to slow down, a rhythm without haste, without resistance, without performance. And this rhythm is not separate from you. It is the rhythm your breath knew before it was trained to race. The nervous system responds more deeply to rhythm than to words. Breath is its first language, and when the breath becomes fast and shallow, the body goes into alert mode. Even when there is no danger, the mind begins to scan, the muscles tense, thoughts become more rigid, but when the breath slows down, the signal changes, safety returns, presence awakens again. And one of the most effective ways to remember this slow breathing is to observe nature, because it has never forgotten it. When you watch the branches of a tree rise and fall, the leaves move in waves, or the grass sways in the wind, you begin to feel a rhythm that underlies everything. It is not mechanical. It is not forced. It is slow, but it is alive. The same rhythm also exists in your body, but stress, noise, and sensory overload tear you away from it. And every time you return, it is not a correction, it is a reunion. Breathing with trees is not about copying their form. It's about matching their pace, feeling how long it takes for a branch to rise and lifting your breath with it. Not to manipulate your breath, but to lengthen it naturally, to let your breath sink with the wind. Let the rhythm of the earth remind the rhythm of your body how to slow down. This is not visualization. It is entrainment, a biological process in which systems synchronize. Just as clocks standing next to each other eventually synchronize, your nervous system also begins to adapt to its environment. That is why spending time in nature is so healing, not because of what you do there, but because of what you don't do. You stop rushing, you stop tensing up, you stop trying to achieve something, and your breath returns to its original intelligence. When this rhythm returns, the mind begins to soften. This is because thoughts are influenced by the breath. When the breath is calm, the thoughts follow. When the breath is steady, reactivity subsides. Over time, this becomes less of an exercise and more of a natural state. You begin to live from a slower default state, with a calmer baseline frequency, one in which the body feels safe and the mind stops looking for threats. Trees are in no hurry. They do not correct themselves excessively. They do not strive for perfection. They respond to what is there. When the wind blows, they move. When the sun shines, they open up. When it is dark, they rest. This is wisdom in motion, and the same wisdom lives within you. It has simply been covered up by thoughts, habits, and speed. Allowing yourself to breathe with the trees does not mean escaping life. It means tuning into a rhythm that encompasses all of life. A rhythm that includes joy and sorrow, light and shadow. A rhythm that does not panic when things change because it knows how to adapt, how to return, how to put down roots. This exercise can be done anywhere in nature. Sit down by a tree, stand by a river, walk through a field. Don't try to meditate, just observe, just feel, just breathe. Let your body find its rhythm again. Let your breath expand without counting. Let your gaze soften. Let your skin listen to the wind. Let your muscles release everything they don't need. You can feel this even in a city. A tree is enough. A piece of sky, a moment of sunshine on your hands. You don't need silence. You don't need distance. You just need presence. Because rhythm doesn't depend on place. It depends on attention. This is not a technique for fixing something. It is a way to return to what is not broken. You are not training your breath. You are training away the habits that have thrown it out of balance. And when that balance is restored, something very old relaxes within you. A kind of memory, a kind of homecoming. Over time, this changes your emotional life. Emotions come and go, but they don't overwhelm you. You feel sadness without breaking down. You feel joy without clinging to it, because your breath has taught your body that waves are something safe. That rhythm can cushion pain. That calm is not the absence of feelings, but the container that gently envelops them. You also begin to perceive time differently. When you tune into the natural rhythm, the minutes stretch out. The hours become softer. There is more space between events. There is less hustle and bustle, more breath between words, more presence between tasks. Life no longer feels like something you have to catch up with, but something you can move within. This movement is not linear, it is seasonal. Like trees, your energy changes, your focus shifts. And when you respect this cycle, you stop forcing productivity. You rest when it is time to rest. You act when it is time to act. And your nervous system thanks you by being more balanced, harmonious, and present. This practice also changes your relationship with other people. You stop adapting to their fear. You stop rushing their silence. You hold space like a tree holds shade, without having to fix anything, without rushing to say anything. Your calm becomes contagious, not because you try, but because your breath teaches others to slow down as well. Make this your exercise for tonight. Not deep breathing, not forced breathing, just natural rhythm. Breathe in as a leaf rises. Breathe out as a branch lowers. Let nature become your metronome. Let silence become your teacher. Let each breath become a reunion with a tempo that brings peace. Now that your breath has returned to its natural rhythm, not through effort, but through the slow movement of the trees, something deeper begins to settle in. A calmness that comes not from doing less, but from needing less. The nervous system no longer has to work hard to keep up. The mind no longer has to justify every moment. A silence arises, not only between thoughts, but also within the desire itself. And in this space, another truth becomes clear. Peace is not found by getting more. It begins when you realize that you already have enough. This is the garment of contentment, the heart of Buddhist simplicity, and the end of restless desire. Restlessness arises from the belief that something is missing. The mind strives for more comfort, more success, more attention, more understanding. But every time it reaches for something, the moment remains behind. The more it chases, the less it rests. And slowly, without noticing, peace is pushed further and further away, not by suffering, but by desire. In the Buddhist tradition, monks wear a robe that symbolizes simplicity. It is not just clothing, it is a statement, a reminder. It stands for letting go of the superfluous, of disorder, of complications. And although most people will never wear such a robe, the call is the same: to live in such a way that you can say, "This is enough," not as resignation, but as freedom. The robe of contentment is not made of fabric. It is made of decisions, of giving up the need to prove yourself, of giving up the need to always be searching, from giving up making every moment a springboard for the next. It is woven from contentment, from the courage to linger in what is already there, and from the clarity to recognize how much energy is lost through wanting. The world promotes constant desire for improvements, for answers, for recognition, and although desire is human, endless desire is suffering. It fragments the mind, it fills quiet moments with tension, it turns life into a race that never ends. But when you embrace simplicity, not as minimalism for aesthetic reasons, but as presence instead of possession, space returns, thoughts slow down, breathing deepens, and the heart feels lighter. Living simply does not mean giving everything away. It means not giving away your peace to things that don't matter. It means choosing what serves your clarity rather than what feeds your desire. It means saying yes with deliberation, saying no with ease. It means knowing when enough is enough, not because there is nothing left to want, but because more does not bring more peace. You start to notice this in small things, when one cup is enough, when one answer is enough, when one breath is enough. And this enough creates space. It loosens the grip. It untangles the nerves. It allows the moment to be whole without needing to be improved. That doesn't mean you stop growing. Growth continues. But it's not driven by lack. It's not fueled by shame. It's shaped by presence. You sow seeds not because you are empty, but because life goes on. And when contentment is your foundation, every step becomes a gift, not a demand. Even relationships change. You no longer need others to complete you, to always agree, to always show yourself in a certain way. You love more freely because love is no longer a transaction. It is a reflection of your own abundance. And that kind of love doesn't suffocate. It breathes. Simplicity also changes how you deal with discomfort. Because when the urge to escape it subsides, it becomes easier to stay. You no longer need every moment to be pleasant. You don't constantly negotiate with the present in order to achieve something better. You encounter what is without resistance, and in this encounter, peace arises. Simplicity clears the mind because complexity exhausts it. Every unnecessary decision robs you of attention. Every additional possession demands energy. Every false need creates pressure. But when you are content with what is necessary, when you start living with what serves you instead of what distracts you, the noise disappears, the clutter disappears, and what remains is something closer to the truth. This does not require perfection. It requires honesty, taking a gentle look at what you have been pursuing, asking yourself what it costs, seeing whether desire has brought peace or unrest, and if the latter is the case, choosing a different rhythm, one that respects your needs without feeding your desires. You can start anywhere. By pausing before you add something else, by asking yourself whether the next yes supports your peace or robs you of it, by creating a little more space in your day, in your head, in your home, not to impress anyone, but to return to what is real. This practice does not need to be proclaimed. It needs to be lived, quietly, consistently, in the way you move, in the way you breathe, in the way you welcome what you already have as if it were enough, because it is. When this becomes your habit, peace is no longer a reward. It is a default setting, a way of being, not a break from being. And when life gets loud again, which it will have a place to return to. Not a place outside, but a feeling inside. The cloak of contentment, the silence of no longer needing, the clarity of letting go before you are forced to, the peace of knowing what is important. Let this cloak be your cloak tonight. Let it envelop your thoughts. Let it loosen the grip of striving. Let it tell your nervous system, we are already home. And let every breath from here on out be a sign of trust that the present moment is not incomplete. It is already complete. From the silence that grows in the garment of contentment, where desire softens and presence expands, a quieter voice begins to sound. Not a voice of discipline or denial, but a voice of guidance. It no longer demands. It asks for depth. It does not cry out. It points the way. Desire has not disappeared. It is simply seen for what it really is, as a signal, not as a problem to be suppressed, but as an invitation to nourish something deeper. Now we meet these signals not with judgment, but with attention. And what we nourish is no longer the restless mind. It is the inner monk, the part of us that has always sought something sacred beneath all the noise. Longings don't come out of nowhere. They arise because something within us wants attention. But the mind often misinterprets the signal. It thinks hunger means food, boredom means stimulation, sadness means escape. So it reaches for whatever is closest at hand. Sugar, scrolling, distraction. But that doesn't satisfy. It only numbs. The signal keeps coming back because the need has never been met. Buddhism teaches us not to fight desire, but to understand it, to meet it with presence, to look beneath it. Because desire is not the enemy, it is the messenger, and the message is always the same. Something needs attention. When you start listening deeply, the cravings become less chaotic. They begin to point inward, not outward. They lead you to devotion, not distraction. Devoted concentration is not religious. It is relational. It means choosing to put your energy into something that brings depth instead of noise. It means transforming desire into curiosity, not asking, "How do I get what I want?" but "What does this really want?" This is how desire becomes clarity. When you stop feeding it with what is easy and start responding with what is true. This response begins with awareness. The moment desire arises, you pause, not to stop it, but to observe it, to pause it, to feel it fully instead of blindly following it. You name it. You breathe with it. You ask, what is this desire pointing to? And often the answer lies not in the object, but in the feeling, in the separation, in the absence of attention. The inner monk does not reject the body. He honors it. He does not shame the mind. He trains it. And he does not ignore desire. He refines it, transforms it from addiction to devotion, from compulsion to choice, from emptiness to fullness. Not with force, but through redirection, by nourishing the part of you that craves silence more than sugar, for connection more than comfort, for meaning more than pleasure. Longing often arises in silence because the mind is accustomed to constant stimuli. So when it becomes quiet, the mind panics. It wants something to hold on to. But if you stay, if you breathe, if you listen, you will find that there is no hunger beneath the longing. It is a longing for presence, for peace, for meaning. And when you give it that, the longing becomes quiet. Not because it has been suppressed, but because it has been heard. This is the exercise. Turn desire into a question. Not, how do I get rid of this? But, what is this telling me? And then give it. A breath, a walk, a prayer, a moment of attention to the body, a gentle touch on the chest, a return to something that nourishes the monk in you, not the merchant, not the addict, not the hunter, but the observer. The quiet one, the one who wants less but lives more deeply. Over time, this changes your relationship with all forms of desire. You don't reject them, you read them. The desire for connection becomes a call to speak honestly. The desire for success becomes a call to serve. The desire for comfort becomes a call to slow down. Every desire becomes a gateway. Every desire becomes a teacher. This also changes your nervous system, because when desire is met with conscious attention instead of quick rewards, the body stops chasing false highs. It begins to stabilize, to regulate itself. You no longer need dopamine spikes to feel good. You need presence, and presence doesn't break down, it sustains. Feeding the inner monk means developing habits that anchor you in clarity, not out of pressure, but out of reverence. You wake up and dedicate your first breath to the present moment. You eat mindfully. You walk without rushing. You speak from your heart. You don't do these things because they are easy, but because they nourish a part of you that cheap pleasures could never nourish. And when you fall, when you give in to old cravings, you don't collapse in shame. You don't spiral downward, you return. You say, today I fed the wrong part. That's okay. I'm still learning how to listen. And then you come back to silence, to choice, to the part of you that is never in a hurry. This approach is not strict. It is gentle. It does not create rules. It creates space. Space to respond rather than react. Space to choose the deeper nourishment. To feel when you are feeding fear or clarity. To feel when you are chasing approval or returning to the present moment. Over time, the craving becomes less intense. Not because you've become numb, but because you've satisfied the hunger behind it. You've learned to give yourself what you really need: silence, meaning, care, connection. And through that, the craving becomes still, like a child who has finally been held in someone's arms. Make this your exercise for tonight. Don't fight the craving. Don't be ashamed of it. See it clearly. Ask it what it needs. Accompany it to its source and let it drink from something real. A breath, a truth, a silence that lasts. From the moment the desire subsided and was gently redirected toward deeper nourishment, a new kind of silence began to blossom. Not the silence of denial or absence, but the silence that arises when the search ends, when the mind stops chasing something to complete itself. In this silence, something else becomes visible, an old, often unnoticed habit that causes silent suffering, the habit of clinging to the I, the belief in a fixed, personal self that must defend, prove, achieve, and solve everything before it can rest. But tonight, there is nothing left to solve. Only the invitation to sleep in the shadow of the Buddha, where non-self does not become an idea to be understood, but a soft place where you can lay down everything you have been carrying around with you. The concept of no self or anatta is one of the most misunderstood teachings of Buddhism. It is neither a denial of experience nor a statement that nothing exists. It is a pointer, a quiet pointer, away from the illusion that there is a permanent, unchanging core within you that must always be in control. And when that illusion fades, peace begins. Because what kept the mind awake was not the events of the day. It was the feeling that everything was happening to you, that you were responsible for making everything right, that you had to carry the burden of being someone. But when you allow the idea of yourself to dissolve, even just a little, the grip loosens. Thoughts still arise, but they don't belong to you. Emotions move you, but they don't define you. There is no owner, no possessor, no fixed identity to protect, just the flow of life. And in this realization, the body begins to rest, not just physically, but deep within. For what could the self defend if there is no self to defend? This is a powerful approach before falling asleep, because at night, stories come to the fore most strongly. Regrets, plans, self-criticism, looping thoughts about what you should have said or done. But each of these stories depends on a central figure, the I. Without this figure, the plot collapses, the mind untangles itself, and what remains is peace. It's not about erasing your life or pretending that nothing matters. It's about loosening your identification, switching from "I failed" to "a failure occurred," from "I am anxious" to "anxiety is present," from "I have to fix everything" to "this moment is happening." Every change releases a hook from your identity, and with every hook that is released, sleep draws nearer. Even in science, identity is considered a construct. Neurologically speaking, self-awareness arises from memory, language, and perception. It is a function, a convenience. It helps us navigate the world. But it is not fixed. It is not real in the sense that pain is real or breathing is real. It is a mask that is mistaken for a face. When you understand this, not intellectually, but from experience, your heart softens. You realize that you are not your name, not your habits, not even your roles. You are not the voice in your head that worries. You are the space in which the voice arises. You are the silence that observes what is happening. And from this place, fear dissolves, not because it has been defeated, but because it no longer has anyone to cling to. Try this when you lie down to sleep. Instead of reviewing the day, observe your thoughts without focusing on any particular one. Let them appear and disappear like clouds without naming them. Feel your body without saying, "my body." Feel your breath without labeling it, "mine." Let everything be, not yours, not about you, just present. The nervous system begins to regulate itself as soon as it is freed from identity. The muscles relax without effort. The breath deepens without effort, because the pressure to be someone, to carry something, to achieve something, even in sleep, is gone. You are no longer holding yourself up. You are being held. Non-self is not emptiness. It is freedom. It is not separation. It is intimacy with all things, because there is no boundary between you and them. When the I recedes, the world comes to the fore. Sounds become clearer, breathing becomes fuller, and every moment becomes enough, even this one. There is no reason to rehearse who you will be tomorrow. There is no reason to replay who you were today. These are costumes, temporary, useful for a while, but no longer necessary. The sleep that comes in the shadow of Buddha is the sleep of letting go of roles, letting go of the past, letting go of the future. What remains is a presence so still that it no longer needs to be named. Even dreams change when you remember the non-self. The mind no longer needs to play out stories of conflict and self-preservation. It can drift, float, rest in a consciousness that does not separate experience from the experiencer. It becomes a breeze, a wave, silence. Make this your last exercise for tonight. Don't do anything. Don't fix anything. Just rest gently in the truth that you don't have to carry yourself to sleep. Sleep will come, not because you chase it, but because there is no one left to chase it. The bed will hold the body, the breath will hold the rhythm, and the space of the non-self will hold the peace. There is no longer a you that needs to be impressed, no longer a you that needs to be fixed, no longer a you that needs to figure something out before it can rest. All that is needed now is presence, openness, emptiness, wholeness, and as the night deepens, this presence will gently carry you into sleep. In this gentle place, where identity had dissolved and no one was left to carry the burden of the day, the body finally began to surrender. Thoughts did not have to stop for peace to come. They simply lost their hold. The desire to control, to explain, to become something disappeared in the silence. But even here, as sleep approaches, thoughts can continue. They drift away, they return, they flicker. And here, a final invitation appears. What if every thought could be seen without judgment? What if, instead of resisting or reacting, the mind became a dust-free mirror? This is a Zen metaphor, the mirror that reflects without distortion. It does not favor one image over another. It does not cling to what appears. It does not resist what comes in. A flawless mirror sees clearly, not because it tries harder, but because it adds nothing. No stories, no analyses, no internal dialogues about how the reflection should be. And that is the essence of true calm, not a mind without thoughts, but a mind that no longer adds judgments to them. Judgments are the first crack in tranquility. Not the thought itself, but the commentary that follows it. A thought arises, perhaps sadness, perhaps fear, perhaps a memory. And almost immediately, the mind speaks. That shouldn't be here. Why am I still thinking about that? What's wrong with me? But none of these comments is the original thought. It is dust. And the more dust settles, the harder it becomes to see clearly. Seeing without judging does not mean becoming passive. It means becoming precise. Knowing the difference between what arises naturally and what the mind adds. That's the difference between pain and suffering. Pain is the original feeling. Suffering is everything the mind builds around it. When the mirror is clean, pain is still pain, but it doesn't stick. It passes, like a cloud reflected on a lake. This clarity does not require silence. It requires honesty. To say, a thought has arisen, without saying, that means I'm broken. To say, there is tension, without saying, I must fail to stay calm. This is the mind returning to its original state, not empty of thoughts, but free of effort. You can practice this anytime, right now. As you listen, thoughts pass by. Some are clear, others are confused, but none of them need to be judged. They don't need to be fixed. They don't need to be named. They don't need to be pursued or feared or held onto. They just need to be seen, like wind blowing across water, like shadows passing over a mountain, simply noticed and allowed to be. This changes the nervous system, because stress is not only caused by the thought itself, but by the struggle against it, by the tension of resistance. However, when you let the thought pass through the mirror without comment, the body remains calm, the breath remains steady, the system remains open. Even so-called negative thoughts lose their sharpness in this way. Anger is just an impulse. Fear is just a signal. Shame is just an echo. But if you don't believe them and don't judge them, they lose their form. They pass by like noises, not like storms. The mind remains clear, not because nothing enters it, but because nothing sticks to it. That is why Zen teaches presence without preferences. Not to be unfeeling, but to stop pushing and pulling. To let joy come without clinging to it. To let sadness come without withdrawing. To see both as weather movements, not as definitions of who you are. Because who you are is the mirror, not what appears in it. Thoughts may come again and again. That is their nature. But you don't have to follow them. You don't have to analyze them. You don't have to give each one meaning. Some thoughts are just echoes. Some are old habits. Some are noise. But none of them are true until you declare them to be true. None of them define you unless you hold on to them. Seeing without judging also changes the way you talk to yourself. Your inner voice becomes gentler. The harshness disappears. Because you have stopped attacking the messenger. You have stopped assuming that every mental phenomenon is a mistake. You have begun to trust your perception more than your analysis. This trust deepens over time. It becomes instinct. The moment a judgment begins to form, you see it. You don't push it away, you observe it. And even judgments lose their sharpness when you see them clearly. They become another reflection, another thought that you let pass by. This clarity is especially important before going to sleep, because at night, thoughts tend to twist and turn. The mind begins to replay things. The critic gets louder. Fears creep in. But if you stay in the mirror, observing without reacting, these thoughts lose their weight. They become background noise instead of a burden. Make this your exercise as you rest tonight. Allow each thought to arise without having to give it meaning. Let each thought pass by without emphasizing or suppressing it. Let the mind be a mirror that reflects everything and holds nothing, not because it resists, but because it no longer needs to hold on. This is the deepest form of rest. Not the absence of thoughts, but the absence of holding on. The freedom to let the world flow through your consciousness without forming it into a problem. This is where the mind becomes truly still, not by silencing life, but by meeting it with spaciousness. Let the mirror become clear. Let your breath slow down. Let go of the stories. They are not your thoughts. They are not what appears in the mirror. You are the space that sees clearly, quietly, and endlessly, no matter what moves within it. And now we rest in this clarity. No more searching, no more solving. Just the light of consciousness reflecting thoughts, breath, and sleep as they come and go. From the clarity of the mirror, where thoughts no longer had to be judged, the mind became still, not empty, but free. Free to observe without reacting, free to let every thought arise and pass without giving it meaning. In this silence, something unexpected emerged. Not an answer, but a question. A question that did not need to be solved, that did not create tension. Just a silent presence, a mystery, an open space. And in this space, peace. Because sometimes the mind does not need an explanation, but permission not to know. This is the koan of silence, the art of leaving questions unanswered and thereby discovering a deeper peace than certainty could ever offer. In Zen Buddhism, a koan is not a riddle with a solution. It is a question that aims to break the mind's habit of having to search for a solution. It deliberately makes no sense, because the goal is not logic, but liberation. And liberation comes when the mind stops forcing answers and begins to rest in what is already there. Most unrest arises from the search for closure. The mind asks, why did this happen? What will they think? What should I do? What if I fail? And when these questions are not answered immediately, the mind panics. It goes round in circles. It spirals. But in truth, Most of these questions do not need to be answered. They need to be held. They need to be acknowledged without being resolved. Because often it is precisely the desire for certainty that keeps peace out of reach. There is power in not knowing, a gentleness, a surrender. When you stop insisting on a solution, the nervous system calms down. The heart no longer has to defend itself. The breath becomes calm again. The body stops tensing up. Because it's not the question that causes stress, it's the belief that there is no answer and that it's your job to find it immediately. Leaving the question unanswered is not avoidance. It is presence. It is acknowledging that some things cannot be solved by thinking. Some things are too big, too delicate, too mysterious to pin down. They need to be lived through. And in this life, answers sometimes emerge, not because they were forced, but because the mind has become quiet enough to receive them. This practice begins with a change. When a question arises, don't chase after it. Breathe, pause, notice the urge to solve it, and instead of following it, stay. Let the question be a companion, not a command. Say, "This belongs here too," and keep breathing. Over time, this changes the way you think. You no longer perceive uncertainty as a threat. You begin to see it as a gateway, as a threshold between old ways of seeing and new ways of being. It becomes a space where something more honest can emerge, something that arises not from fear or urgency, but from patience and depth. This also changes how you approach problems. Instead of rushing to fix something, you start by listening. You wait. You trust that wisdom isn't always loud. Often it whispers, and it only speaks when the noise of your search has quieted enough for you to hear it. Letting questions rest also softens relationships. You stop demanding explanations from others. You stop trying to bring every conversation to a conclusion. You begin to understand that people, like life, are complex. They are not always logical, and they don't have to be. Love does not depend on complete understanding. It depends on presence. Even your relationship with yourself begins to change. You stop questioning your past. You stop having to justify your feelings. You stop turning every doubt into a mistake, and you begin to grant yourself the same grace. Not knowing, not being finished, being in a process. That is the essence of the koan, not confusion, but invitation. It invites you to rest in the middle, not at the beginning, not at the end, just in the middle, right here, where nothing is resolved, but everything is alive. Where questions are not burdens, but companions. Where the mysterious is not something to flee from, but something you can fully enter into. You can feel this in your body. When a question falls into silence, your breath deepens, your chest softens, your shoulders relax, because the pressure to find a solution is gone. What remains is space, a vastness that allows you to be even when you don't understand. This practice does not mean giving up clarity. It means not rushing it, letting it mature, letting it arrive in its own time. Because some questions are not meant to be answered now, and some may never be answered, and yet life goes on. You keep breathing, you belong. Let this be your place of rest tonight. Let the questions come without fear. Let them sit beside you like old friends, not ones you need to fix, but ones you can breathe with. What will tomorrow bring? Leave that question unanswered. Why do I still feel this way? Let that question rest. What if I never figure this out? Let something deeper than thoughts hold that question. And in this quiet attitude, the mind no longer has to be right. It no longer has to win. It no longer has to protect a story. It can rest. Because peace does not come from answers. It comes from the freedom to let go of the need for answers. Now, let yourself fall into this silence. Not because everything has been clarified, but because it doesn't have to be clarified. You are safe here, even without knowing it, especially without knowing it. Leave the question open and let sleep carry you into its silence. From the silence, where questions are finally allowed to remain open without having to be answered, a different kind of knowledge emerges, silent, unspoken, and far older than thought. It does not arise through analysis. It does not argue. It comes like the breath in a sleeping room, subtle, easy to overlook, but undeniably present as soon as you feel it. This is the silent bell, a kind of wisdom that never had to be spoken to be recognized. It does not draw attention to itself. It does not come through effort. And yet, it has always been there, guiding the mind, calming the body, bringing the heart back into harmony. There is a widespread misconception that peace must be earned through explanations. That calm only comes when the problem is solved. But Buddhism teaches that peace arises from the space beneath the solution, from the place where intuitive wisdom already knows what the mind has not yet figured out. This wisdom does not work in language. It doesn't have to. It shows itself in the present moment, in decisions that feel right without needing to be justified, in moments when the mind steps back and something deeper simply knows. Everyone has experienced this at some point. A moment of clarity without effort. A sudden silence that makes everything obvious. A yes or no feeling that does not arise from weighing up the pros and cons. These moments are not coincidental. They are echoes of the silent bell. They arise when the noise has subsided enough that you can hear something older than logic, something that has never been spoken but lives in the body, in the breath, in the ground beneath your feet. The reason this wisdom is often overlooked is not that it is rare, but that the mind is loud. Thoughts rush in to tell, interpret, evaluate. They want to turn intuition into explanations. But the moment they do, purity is lost. The signal is clouded. The bell grows quiet. That is why silence is sacred, not as absence, but as amplification. True leadership comes from this place. Not because it has the loudest voice, but because it does not try to convince. It does not drown out your doubts. It simply waits. And when you stop chasing new thoughts, when you stop trying to solve everything through analysis, this deeper knowledge emerges, not with answers, but with presence. Not with plans, but with direction. You can feel this direction in your body. It doesn't create tension, but alignment. A yes that opens your chest. A no that tightens your stomach. These are not random reactions. They are signals from the part of you that has always known the truth, long before your mind tried to put it into words. In practice, this means learning to trust the space between thoughts, to pause before answering, to feel the echo of the bell before rushing to speak. It means realizing that not every decision needs to be thought through. Some just need to be felt completely. And the more you listen in this way, the clearer the signal becomes. The more often you hear what has always been there. This does not mean giving up thinking. It means letting it serve, not lead. Letting thoughts arise after the bell rings, not before. Letting logic shape the details, not dictate the direction. Wisdom does not argue with logic. It includes it, but it does not depend on it. It is rooted deeper. This way of listening becomes a way of life, not just during meditation, but in your daily movements. You begin to sense when something is wrong before it becomes a problem. You know when to take a step back without needing a reason. You sense when someone's words are true, not because of evidence, but because of resonance. The silent bell also protects you, not through fear, but through quiet knowledge, that feeling in your chest when something is wrong, that stillness in your mind when something is right. You don't have to justify these signals. You have to respect them, because when you do, life begins to flow with less resistance. Not because everything is easy, but because you have stopped betraying what you already know. Even in moments of loss or confusion, the bell is there. It doesn't fix anything. It doesn't change anything. It just holds. It reminds you that something inside you can remain calm even when everything else is wavering. Something inside you doesn't have to panic. It doesn't have to know why. It just has to remain present. When you let this kind of wisdom guide your life, you give up the need for certainty. You stop needing to understand everything before you act. You start trusting what feels deeply rooted, what feels clear in your body, even if it's hard to explain. This is not recklessness. This is ancient intelligence, intelligence that exists beyond language, intelligence that doesn't need permission to be true. This silent bell also guides healing. It tells you when to rest, even when the world is pushing you. It tells you when to speak, even when your voice is trembling. It tells you when to let go, even when your mind wants to hold on. Healing is not just about repairing the past. It is about reconnecting with what has always been whole. Make this your practice now. As the night deepens and your thoughts slow down, listen, not with your ears, not with your mind, but with your awareness. The bell is always ringing, not with a sound, but in silence, not with logic, but with truth. And the more you listen, the more you know, without needing to understand where that knowledge comes from. This is the deepest peace. The kind of peace that does not require silence, but arises from it. The kind of peace that does not need to understand everything in order to feel safe. The kind of peace that arises from a place within you that has never been touched by fear. Let this place guide you now. Let it hold your breath. Let it guide your dreams. Let it remind you that nothing needs to be louder than this. From the soft echo of the silent bell, where wisdom whispered without words and insight arose without effort, the mind began to shift its focus. It no longer clung to the illusion that clarity must come from thinking. It remembered something older, something that lay beyond analysis. But even here, in the deepest silence, a thread often remains, the subtle belief that everything that arises within us is somehow personal, that every thought is your thought, that every feeling belongs to you, that every breath is mine. And that is the next veil to be lifted, because the moment this belief subsides, a deep vastness emerges, a calm that is no longer limited by identity. This is the breath of the universe, the realization that the breath flowing through you never belonged to you in the first place. Most people live in a state of constant tension because of their sense of ownership. The mind is seen as a personal chamber. Thoughts are referred to as my thoughts, emotions as my feelings. And this sense of ownership creates pressure. Because if the thoughts are mine, I have to control them. If the emotions are mine, I have to manage them. If the breath is mine, I have to do it right. And this responsibility becomes heavy. But Buddhism offers a different perspective, one that begins with the breath. The breath is the most intimate and at the same time most impersonal experience. It happens through the body, but not because of the ego. No one has to think about breathing. No one has to control it. It moves by itself, and not only within you, but in all living beings. It moves in animals, in forests, across oceans. The wind that sways the trees is not separate from the air that fills your lungs. It is one breath moving in different forms. When you look at the breath in this way, the tension dissolves. You stop clinging to your experiences. You begin to realize that my body is only a temporary form shaped by something greater. That inhaling is not your possession, but a rhythm shared by all living beings. And suddenly, breathing becomes sacred, not because it is dramatic, but because it is universal. Because it reminds you that life does not just happen to you, it happens through you. This realization changes everything. It untangles the personal story that feeds most of our suffering. If thoughts are not mine, I don't have to correct them all. If feelings are not mine, I don't have to justify or suppress them. If the breath is not mine, I can simply rest in it. Let it move me. Let it guide me. Let it remind me that I am not separate. This is not separation. It is a deeper connection. You are not ignoring your experiences. You realize that you do not have to own them. You realize that consciousness is not possession. It is participation. You are part of the stream, not the rock. And once you feel that, the idea of me softens, less heavy, less sharp. Still there, but transparent. You begin to realize that the mind is not a private space with locked doors. It is a field, a movement. Thoughts come and go like the weather in the sky. They do not announce their origin. They do not belong to anyone. They are just temporary patterns. And the moment you stop claiming them as your own, they no longer stick. That is freedom. Not the freedom to control, but the freedom to let go. You don't have to control every sensation. You don't have to name every change. You just breathe and let the universe breathe you. This also brings a deep sense of calm to everyday life, because much of the stress we carry around with us is not caused by what is happening, but by the thought that we have to cope with everything on our own, that every emotion has to be processed personally, that every mistake defines us. But when you let go of this sense of ownership, the mind softens. It becomes more fluid, less reactive, more compassionate. Even suffering becomes easier. The pain is still there. The difficulties remain. But you no longer burden yourself with thoughts like, "This is my failure. This is my burden. This is my fault." You are simply present with what is. You let your body feel. You let your breath hold. You let the moment pass. Over time, this shapes how you present yourself in the world. You listen better because you're not busy defending your point of view. You pause more often because you're not concerned with protecting your identity. You respond more gently because you've stopped taking every thought personally, and that makes your presence secure, for others, and for yourself. That is what non-separation really means. Not merging with everything, but remembering that you were never cut off. You were never out of rhythm. The breath of the universe has always flowed through you. You just forgot it. You confused movement with possession. But now the grip is loosening. Let this be your place of rest tonight. Let the breath move you effortlessly. Let it flow in and out like waves on the beach. Don't name it. Don't take possession of it. Just notice it. Just accept it. Don't think of each breath as your own, but as part of something older than the body, wider than the mind, deeper than the self. Here, peace comes effortlessly, because effort was only necessary to protect the idea of me. And as soon as that subsides, the entire system breathes more easily. Not because you have fixed something, but because you have finally let go of the belief that it was ever your job to fix anything. And now, from this breath that belongs to no one and flows through everything, we continue, not into more thoughts, but into the quiet space beneath, where silence is not absence, but presence without possession. After 3 quiet hours of return, breath by breath, thought by thought, moment by moment, you have arrived at a place where the world rarely ventures, in silence. A calm that does not demand silence, but lives beneath the noise. You have wandered through teachings that are not meant to be memorized, but felt. From the silent gong that trained your mind to hear the unspoken, to the robe of contentment that loosened the grip of desire. You have learned to bow to the moment, to bend like bamboo, to touch the earth in your own consciousness. You have learned that not every thought must be believed, and not every question must be answered. That peace is not something to be pursued, but something to be discovered when you stop claiming every breath, every thought, every feeling as mine. You have encountered ghost thoughts. You have watched your identity dissolve like a sand mandala. You have remembered how to breathe with trees, how to nourish the inner monk, how to fall asleep, not by silencing the mind, but by realizing that it never needed to be fought. And now you rest, not because everything is perfect, but because you have made peace with what is. The mind doesn't need to know. The self doesn't need to fix anything. The breath doesn't need to belong to you. Silence is enough. This moment is enough. You are enough. If these teachings have touched you deeply, leave a comment below. Write, "I am calm now." Let it be your gift, your memory, your way of closing the circle. And if you want more journeys like this, journeys that not only help you fall asleep, but also help you wake up differently, subscribe to the channel and click the bell. Where this comes from, there is even more peace. Sleep well, wake up light, and thank you for walking this path with us.